talk about. This should be probably one of the best shows. I think we got some really unique topics that we don't normally talk about today that we're going to be hitting. Before we get going, though, I just wanted to say hello, welcome everybody, say thank you for coming out here, hit the thumbs up button, and quickly introduce everybody. So I'm Jason, run this channel. You've probably seen it before. Next to me, I've got my buddy David Green. I'm going to figure out this pointing eventually. He's an amazing game developer, runs a company Warped Imagination. Go check him out on YouTube. And he'll be talking a lot about some crazy, cool Halloween stuff. You can see his little chair he's got behind him over there. Probably talk about strapping people into chairs and all kinds of crazy stuff. Down below me, I got Yorai, who's a lead developer on the Terraria team. I'm sure you guys have heard of and played Terraria. It's an amazing game, and he's always here with really cool insights on stuff. And he's got some, I think, especially unique stuff today to share that nobody else is you're gonna hear here first, probably. At least I think it's gonna be very interesting. Down below or next to him, come on, arrow pointers, I've got Jason Story. And Jason Story is on here every week. He's one of the best developers and just teachers about development that I know. He's really great at explaining things, shares all kinds of great info, and now has a YouTube channel. He's got an amazing number of subscribers per video, but needs more subscribers. So go make sure that you check it out, subscribe to his channel, learn about more advanced game development stuff, and support him through his Ko-fi page. And then right down at the bottom, which I can't reach through because I gotta go down below everyone, you got Andrew from Infinity PBR or Magic Pig Games, building a really cool RPG all online. You can see the actual process of building out an RPG on YouTube if you subscribe to his channel. But today, since it's Halloween, he's also got a really cool Halloween sale going on. It's going on the asset store, and I've linked directly to some of his assets that are on sale right now. I highly recommend you go check them out and grab them while they're still on sale. Andrew, how long are they still on sale for? What's the end on that Halloween sale for the assets?
I can't remember. I don't think the Halloween sale ends today. The Mega Bundle ends today, but the Halloween sale ends in a couple days, I think, but not much longer. So
Okay, and that brings
yeah.
us to that bundle sale. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about today was the GameDev tool bundle, or the tools bundle. I forget what it's called on the actual asset store. There's a bundle of developer tools available for Unity devs that was up for sale for, I believe, $35. I'm going to pull up the link right now. I've got it actually linked down in the description for everybody, the toolbox bundle. But I want to go through kind of what was in there and what made me buy it. Because when I saw the bundle, I think Michael sent it over to me. A couple people sent it to me, but I think he was the one that kind of kicked me over to it. When I saw the bundle, I had to get it. I was like, oh, this is a crazy deal. Oh, it's $45. But it came with, how many is this? Like 20 different tool assets, including things like Dungeon Architect for doing dungeon randomization and a fracturing library. And there were a couple other ones that I thought were pretty interesting, like Asset Hunter Pro. I remember you guys had talked about that one before, and I didn't own it, and I thought, this was a good opportunity to grab that, along with a couple other things that I've been wanting to try out. Did you guys try this bundle?
I literally used Asset Hunter in a project 2 weeks ago, just before we added a new developer onto a team. So we cleared out the project just beforehand, so we got rid of anything that we weren't using. So yeah, that one I actively got use out of very recently.
Yeah, I used it in one project, and I was amazed at how convenient it was to see all my unnecessary usages of assets all around.
Nice. And that one, it just goes through and scans for unused stuff so that you can remove it from your project, right? It's one I haven't actually used myself.
Yeah, so it does that, and it also shows on the actual project view how many usages you're getting out of a folder. So you can filter out, say, like clean out all the assets from this exact subfolder and don't take out these assets. Which
okay.
It's nice. It's really nice.
Yeah, let me pop it up. I'm going to screen share it for everybody who happens to be watching us live. And if you are watching us live, please hit the thumbs up button and make sure that you're subscribed. And here, let's just bring it up. Take a look and see if there's anything else that you guys thought was interesting or maybe makes this worthwhile and grabbing. I know for me, Dungeon Architect was one of them. It's one that I've used, and I already had it on a different company account, and just kind of wanted to have it along with the other ones. That and the fracturing library both seemed like really interesting ones for me. But what about you guys?
Enhanced scroller is something that is incredibly underrated because it allows you to pool things as you
Yeah.
scroll them. So even if you have 2 billion elements, you can actually make that work. And
This is
beyond that,
actually a problem people send to me all the time too. A really common one that people have where they want to go through and make like a giant list of scrolling stuff, like a normal UI, but then they don't want to instantiate 10,000 game objects because everything breaks and falls apart. It sounds like
It's really
this
well
doesn't
structured.
deal with that.
I've used that before, and it not only does it work well for just having like a prefab set, and then you can have infinite scrolling with a pooled set of objects. They actually have implemented stuff very similar to the WPF library components. So you've got things like bindings. So you can actually do your classic like bind to a data source and stuff. So they automate a lot of what would be complicated or confusing stuff.
Yeah, that seems really cool. Well, what other ones? Anything else in here stand out for you guys that make you think that people should grab this one?
The
So I
motion
want to say,
matching looks cool, but I've never used it. I just
so
think it
same. I
looks
haven't
really
used
cool.
it, but yeah. So I can say this isn't for people who don't have a lot of animation assets available. But if you can actually make use of this, this is freaking amazing, and it's the most fun you'll have as a programmer to make this work. Because if you're unfamiliar with the concept of motion matching, what you're doing is you have a library of poses or animations that have those poses, and as you move around a character, you provide information as to how to pick the animations, and it will move between them for you depending on how you tag and value those animations. So you can say, I don't have a transition between walking, standing, or attacking, but right now I am attacking. It will choose the best animation for attacking and blend them in a super nice way to whatever I'm doing right now. And once I'm done, if I'm trying to move or trying to walk, it will blend perfectly because it's matching the poses to the best poses that I have from a library of running poses. It's incredible if you can set it up.
Okay, and what are the drawbacks or downsides? Why would you not use it for every character in your game? Because I mean, you're looking at the visuals here. For anybody who isn't seeing it, it just looks like extremely perfect character movement, where the character runs, stops, turns on a dime, and is able to move essentially like a really agile human. So why would you not use this for all your characters, since it seems so much better?
So the problem with using it for all your characters is that you need actual poses or animations for all those things. It's not generating them, it's picking them out of existing ones. So what happens is if you have a very small library or you're making the animations yourself, you're going to run out of samples that look okay, and it will try to do its best, but you're authoring extra data to do all of this, and you're not getting much value because you're hand authoring all the animations. Now, if you have motion capture tools or you're buying packs from the asset store that have way too many animations, this is perfect. But if you're not doing that, that's playing loudly.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize there was audio playing. It unmuted when I clicked over to the next one. So you're saying if you're not
So if you're not using a lot of animations and you're making them yourself, you're going to have a harder time using this. You still can, but you're going to have a harder time. There's also some difficulty for non-programmers to use this because you actually have to provide all the values that the motion matcher will use to determine what to do. So you have to tell it, I am now running, I am now attacking, I am now doing this special state where I'm low health and also the character is debuffed with this kind of thing. And if you're not a programmer and it's not a comfortable field for you, you're not going to get a lot of value out of this.
Oh, okay. So it does change kind of how you interact with the animator. But I mean, if you're not a programmer, you've got to interact with it somehow anyway. So I guess this probably is still more complicated though.
Yeah, it's
Really
more
interesting.
work, but a lot of value.
And it looks like they said it was relatively performant and showed some demos of quite a few characters running around, so it doesn't seem like that's much of an issue.
Yeah.
Nice. Well,
I'm
any
gonna have
other
to pick this
assets
up.
on here you guys want to jump into? Dave, you got one?
I'm going to have to pick this up. I haven't actually got this one. I completely forgot about it being on sale. I've got a fair number of these things already from different things like the lip syncing and eye movement stuff. I've got on a couple of other packages. But
The eye movement one is actually really good. Like it's one of those ones which
Mhm.
is so subtle, but you've no idea how much value it adds.
oh yeah,
The first time I've seen it done properly was so obviously VR is specifically talk about VR. Your eye does cicadas, and like natural eye movement is this like if you actually stare someone in the eyes, their eyes aren't stationary. They do this sort of flickering back and forth and assessing the surroundings, and that's one of those uncanny valley things where you know something's fake if it's just staring perfectly still forward. And so having this sense that it's observing its surroundings is a really big deal. And there was one that really stood out to me. It's such an old one back in the earlier VR days, where there was, I think it's called coffee in VR or something. It was some simple thing, and it was just you sitting across from a woman at a table in a coffee shop, and it had that eye movement and occasional like head movement where she'd look out the window and stuff, and just sitting there. There's no sound, there's no interaction, but you would swear like there's subtext. Like you're sitting there going, is she mad at me? And like she keeps looking away from whenever I look over at her, and then there's paintings on the wall, and you're like, oh, maybe she's just looking at the paintings behind me. And your brain concocts so many narratives about what this relationship between you and this person is, exclusively based on some randomly timed flickering of eyes and head motion. And it really stood out to me as like, I'm amazed how much my brain is trying to make sense of this scenario that it wouldn't be if it was just a character sitting there perfectly forward.
yeah.
And then I saw my friend Blair used it like to death in his game. He did Technolust for yeah. He's got like 3 different games under that kind of the banner of that, and all of his characters have that. Like he used facial scans and the eye movement and stuff. And it's interesting how big of a difference that like engagement with another character can be. You know?
Yeah, we did. I did a lot of VR training stuff for companies in the enterprise space, and you have narrators a lot of times standing there in the same equipment and all the rest, talking you through what you're about to do, etc. And just the amount of times I see these VR training companies that have just people that are like sock puppets, just going like this as they're talking through stuff, and it's terrible, and it completely takes you out of the immersion. Whereas using lip syncing, where they're mouthing the movements, they're getting synonyms and everything's moving correctly, and the eyes move with it. And people that take the time to process the actual blends first, and then go through the voice, and then take it to the next level by adding the odd eye movement. They blink every now and again. They express when they're actually making the lip sync as well. It just, as you say, it takes it to the next level. It makes you believe you're actually talking to the person, because a lot of people switch off when there's just a sock puppet going there. They go, oh, this person isn't real. So they switch off and look away, and they're looking around, they're enjoying VR, and they're not paying attention to the person that's actually talking to them. So yeah, lip syncing, eye movement, all that sort of thing just really accelerates what you're trying to get across.
Yeah. So what you're saying right now is I was actually adding eye movement and twitching of the eyes and blinking for a character in a project about a year ago, and I ended up using an asset from the store called Look Animator, I think, and it just added so much value just from ticking the box that says "Okay, move the eye," and it also handles the blinking for you. It's really convenient. The more that I used it, the more I loved it, and I started tweaking with the settings in runtime just to make it even better. But you get so much value out of it. Also, if you have more in-depth eye shading, you get a lot of extra value from the eye moving and then physically reflecting the surface or having the shine on the eye move. It captures players' eyes because of the contrast or bloom, if you have any.
What was the name of that asset?
I think it was Look Animator.
Look Animator? Okay.
And just to note, if somebody is going to implement this themselves, just be careful. Like with most things in animation, it's not just random, right? It may look random, but the name for when your eye's doing that is called saccades. It's a weird word, but effectively, it's a specific kind of movement. It has this. It's they call it a ballistic movement because it flicks in like very fast directions. But effectively, you are going to implement your own. look up how the eye moves. There's like I think 4 categories of Icicating. It's a whole big thing. There's a whole load of stuff that boils down to make realistic eye movement is like they're not complicated algorithms. They're just a few lines, but you have to make sure that it's not just like randomly picking different positions. The same thing goes for motion for wandering. Like you've seen this in games where you've got a character wandering around and they just look like they turn 180 every time in this really weird way. And that's because they're just doing wandering by literally picking a new point and rotating. The way you do a correct wander, if you want to, well, if you're going by kind of a steering behavior approach, is you place a sphere in front of a character, you put a point on the sphere, and you go towards that point. That way, every point is sequentially always within a turn radius of where the character is looking, and so the movement always does this rather than like complete 180 in different directions. So just to note, when you are doing something that looks like random motion, look into it first and check out the various different algorithms that are at your disposal, because there's a huge difference between I'll just randomly add some stuff versus even just subtly adding pseudo random controls to that.
Also,
Yeah,
it's not just. Go ahead.
I was going to say, taking that even further, be careful when when you have an NPC that's looking at you. If they don't move their body but they move their head, it's really weird. And I've seen games where the NPC can literally turn their head like way back, and their shoulders are stiff, and they're still doing their idle animation like this, but their head is like turning like they're out of I mean, you might be doing a horror game, it's Halloween, but it looks terrifying. So yeah, that's another thing to take in. It's all I mean, watch yourself in the mirror. If you've ever been in a big studio or anything like that and you're watching animators, they all have mirrors on their desk and little puppets. And what they're doing is watching how they actually react to scenarios and everything to get the correct facial expressions, to get the correct movements and everything. Because yeah, sometimes your rigid character standing there looking at you is freaking everybody out because they literally just move in their head.
In fact, actually, when you talk about mirrors, the name for that is literally mirroring. It's when you have when someone is talking to somebody naturally. Like again, it's fascinating if you actually pay attention to this. People will move their bodies to match another person, and if it's a really big sign of their engagement in a conversation, like if somebody, basically the direction of someone's feet pointing tells you how engaged they are in what you're doing. I know it's a small thing, but if someone's feet are pointing towards yours, it means they are actively physically turning their body towards the conversation you're having. And if somebody's trying to leave a scenario, they'll slowly move their feet in the other direction, and you'll see the body turn away. And that's the most visual indication you can give of giving someone a shoulder, right? Like you're actively moving away from them. And so the same goes with characters in games, is if you have a character NPC, you should have them rotate such that their body is at least partially faced towards the character that you're talking to. Otherwise, you get that weird scenario where you talk to an NPC on the side, and then they just like their body's facing away from you, and they look like an NPC, right? They need to be engaged with you, and there's a weighted amount for head to body movement. If you notice, people will move their body more and then the head to adjust, or vice versa, depending on the context. So yeah, huge topic there to look into how body motion works relative to conversation.
Also, to add to realism, make sure you don't do things instantly, because people take time to react, and it's even more apparent when you have eye movement, because the eyes tend to stay in a place for a while and then after a delay move to another angle to look at whatever they need to look at. There's also thresholds where the iris won't move until something got far away enough from its main viewpoint. And it's the most unnatural thing ever when something looks at you perfectly, no matter how you're moving. On the frame, it's just perfectly staring at you in silence.
There's an interesting company. The name has left me now, but they were doing VR training on interviewing, and you were actually interviewing people in the training environment, and they'd done a really good trailer of an old man sitting there, and you're actually interviewing. I think you're actually firing the guy, actually. I think it was that one. But the body movement and the gestures and the way he's looking away when you're being harsh to him or something like that, it's really well done. How much of it was real, I don't know, but the trailer looked really good.
And it's amazing too how it's not like, it doesn't have to be. It may sound like we're saying, oh, everything has to be perfectly tailored. No, it's like the rules of animation. There's simple rules that guide complex behaviors. And one of the best examples for me is, so Half-Life 2 obviously wasn't a VR game when it came out, but there was multiple. There was the Half-Life VR mod, followed by the more advanced versions of it. And if you play through that game in VR, there hits that point where you meet Alex for the first time through that run, and then there's like an elevator bit where you're going down an elevator, and they have the dialogue sequence where she's like, "Oh, I don't know if you remember me," or whatever, and that whole sequence is fantastic because I remember playing that the first time, and she has the most awkward body language imaginable. Like again, all of the stuff, the feet slightly moved awkwardly, the shoulder. She's kind of like there's this thing called self-soothing motions. There's all these little things that people do when they're like, "Oh, I don't know if you remember me," was there, and again the eye movement, the head stuff, and I'm just like, I can feel her awkwardness from a perspective of a VR game, but it's not a VR game. It wasn't built for VR. But me sitting here looking at the character, I can sense all of that because the body motion is kind of well done, and that's obviously comes down to a lot with motion capture and stuff. But suffice to say, like just some basic understanding of tying the body motion to the interactions you're doing, huge difference.
I want to bring up as far as recommendations go. We talked a lot about these things, but they're actually really simple to implement if you're using things like the asset store or existing solutions from other people. And there's actually a pack of about 3 assets I can recommend that I've used myself from Theme Possible Creations. And they just handle everything for you. It's just literally drop 3 components, set some fields, and you're done, and makes the animations feel so much better through gameplay. So take a look there because it's really not going to take more than a day to implement some of these features.
I've always been impressed with that publisher. They make these just very low price, high quality, like simple things that do one very important thing. Like jiggling is, I hadn't seen that one before, but jiggling. If you need something to jiggle, I bet that'll do it.
I'll one up and say the assets are actually properly authored, and there's a package of assembly definitions. If you actually care about that, you just open that and it automatically sets up all the assembly definitions for all these assets to work together perfectly. I have never been more amazed at assembly definitions in an asset than this asset. So,
Wow, yeah, these look really good. Are just all of these assets going through?
yeah, Jason and I joked about how the trailer for the leaning animator was actually a bit awkward, but the assets themselves are great and I love them.
Yeah, I've said before that oftentimes people who are really skilled at one thing tend to be lacking something very serious in another field, and people who are really good at making things like this often aren't great at advertising themselves. And so there's some scenarios where, like, to be fair, some of the videos on this comically bad. Like they look like bad assets, but if you take a breath, step back, and apply logic to it and how you would apply it yourself, they're actually really good. So it's just you just have to pay attention to what they're because and I had this problem. I've said this before. My first asset I ever put the asset store got declined because my marketing was atrocious. Because the code was fine, but the marketing was terrible. And I'm perfectly like that's just a thing. You have to learn how to do that stuff. Some of these are a lot better now, but there was 1 or 2 other ones which like just looks a bit silly. So
Yeah, that's the one.
yeah, like the whole point is that it's very clever and interesting how important the animation is. But objectively, with this on or off, if I had to pick, I would choose the off. Like that's not a sales pitch for how it looks because it's overzealous animation. But the tool is powerful. You just need to know how to use it correctly.
Yeah, it just seems like I've been missing out. I didn't know this existed. What's a loading spinner creator? Just creates little loading spinners. Okay. Yeah, these are all very useful, and they're so cheap. $5 for the asset.
Yeah, but for the loading spinner, Jason, you can just use a video capture of that thing in the corner
Yeah, just run that.
that everybody
Switch
comments on.
modes though. It's in the wrong mode for that. Nope. There we go.
There
Let's
you
load
go.
in green since we're next to Yoda. All right, I put that back on. Thanks to Dave.
Oh yeah, blame me for that one. Yeah, that won't come up in the comments.
If you hate the green spinner, you can thank Dave. Oh yeah, this is a cool one too. This one's free. Ground fitters. I guess people want to check it out. They can go try out one of the free assets right there.
That to me is one of those ones that's such a red flag for projects. Is if someone's released a project and their character's feet are hovering off the ground, it's like, come on, just do a tiny bit of literally a single script. There's like 10 different assets. Some of them are free that just ground the feet of your animation, and it's such a night or day difference. That's one of like hovering random characters is so bad compared to just grounding the feet.
A nice big gap between the shadow and the feet, where they're actually off the ground. Yeah.
There is one thing I'd say about this where you have to have perfect colliders for this to work, and there are some games that will just not bother to have perfect colliders match the visuals, and it's driving me mental when I see the character at least 30 centimeters up from the floor for these specific parts of like a big scene because they couldn't be bothered. Sometimes it's an optimization thing too, I guess, if the mesh looks high density of elevations, but you don't want to pay the cost, so you're just putting a big fat rectangle or a box, I guess. But yeah, be careful about how bad this looks in important areas, at least.
Yeah, grounding feet's definitely an important one. But I wanted to
there's
talk
corners
about
you can't
Andrew's.
cut.
Go ahead,
No,
Jason.
sorry, good. I was just
I
there are
was just going to
corners
say
you
I want
can't
to talk
cut.
about Andrew's assets. Let's talk.
Just go.
Yeah. So, Andrew, you got a bunch of stuff that's on sale today too, right? As part of that Halloween sale.
The Halloween sale. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the Halloween sale. It's almost all. I mean, there's some. I think there might be a couple tools, but it's almost all art, 2D art, mostly 3D art, some sounds. But I had a bunch of Infinity PBR stuff selected. There we go. And there's a whole bunch there. 12 packs. The spiders are always popular. Spiders, bats, devils, demons. Those are the top ones. The bone dragon. So a lot of cool stuff there. Happy to be in the sale, and this is stuff that doesn't always go on sale too. I think the Halloween sale is specific to creepy, crawly, spooky things. So a lot in that whole sale that probably never goes on sale.
Yeah, these are very cool ones. Everybody, if you haven't seen Andrew's stuff before, you should definitely go check it out because it's always just crazy, super high definition assets. I wanted to try to pop up the full sale too, but somehow I lost my link. I just had it and then I lost it to just show some of the other stuff because there was
if
you sent me the
click
big
the sale
list of
drop down in
everything
the
that's on
top.
sale.
If you click the sale drop down in the top, or did it work?
I think I've got it pasted right there. Is that it?
There we go. Yeah,
I clicked on the link there.
That'll work.
Oh, there's a coupon too, an extra 10% off. I didn't even notice that.
I forgot about that as well.
So it looks like you use the code SPOOKY, you get 10% off on purchases of 100 or more. Okay, there's all kinds of cool stuff in here.
Yeah.
Forest
the
environment.
forest packs at the top, those are great. And the sounds, I've always I made a short video about this one on the launch day, and I always say this, and every time there's a mega bundle or humble bundle or wherever, I'm like, oh, there's sounds, get the sounds pack. You never know when you're going to need them, but when you need them, you're going to need a library of sounds. And I think the same goes for animations, especially with the other animator tool. Just having a huge library of sounds and animations is probably a good thing.
Yeah, it's definitely something worth
the
having.
music as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's the thing with my packs. I should probably mention, I rarely mention, but a lot of my packs, most of the ones on sale, come with music as well. Customizable music that you can even remix in the editor. So
yeah, you should definitely mention that.
By a composer, Nathan Clearly, who did I think 30 something tracks for the Infinity PBR stuff. So a lot of music and sound effects too.
Like these little cartoon Halloween dudes. It just make me want to make a Halloween themed game now. Every time I see something like this, I get scared that I'm just going to grab the asset and spend the entire day just coding up some weird thing around the theme of that asset. And then it'll be tomorrow. Halloween will be over. I'll lose interest. What were we saying, Jim?
Someone asked to zoom in a bit so they can see the assets better.
Oh yeah, I probably should have done that. I'm gonna just close that out though, and just blab about them instead. Because on Halloween assets and just building Halloween games, I kind of wanted to talk today about some of the crazy shit that Dave did with that. He's done lots of just insane Halloween projects, and I also wanted to talk about just doing some other home projects. So one of the things I've been wanting to do forever is like some sort of interactive Halloween project using like vision or something. Initially I was thinking with like Kinect, being able to like sense kids out in the front yard or in the driveway and have it be some sort of interactable thing with something projecting onto the ground, right? Where they could maybe run over and stomp on some spiders or something and have it play some sound. And it would be like some fun little interactive thing that they could do in the front yard while they're running by. Um, but
Not in
I've got,
daylight.
what's that?
Not in daylight. The Kinect does not work well outside when the sun's out.
Yeah, and I was thinking like nighttime. This would be like
Oh yeah,
Halloween,
that'll
like when
work.
they're trick or treating, they're running
Yeah.
around, they come by and just have like some sort of an interactive thing. And I never ended up getting around to actually building them. I always have these weird ideas of things that I want to get done and build, but it's always so time consuming. And then by the time I get super motivated for it, Halloween's almost here, and then by the time I'm ready to do it, it's today, and it's a little bit too late. Right? Like last year and the year before, I set up little Halloween projects, but I literally did them like the day before Halloween. So I wanted to talk about some of yours, Dave, because you've done some, I'm not necessarily just Halloween, but just kind of Halloween themed and spooky projects in general.
Yeah.
Are you
So
doing anything this year? Or?
no, because we were going to do something big in the house, and then we decided actually we didn't want loads of people in the house this year, so we put it off to next year. Because my wife's actually finally given me the go ahead to put scary stuff up in the house, because she feels like she can still walk around the house after it's all been taken down. There were things like I was planning on doing Pepper's Ghost, and I've done lots of experience with Pepper's Ghost. And if you don't know what it is, look it up. It's fantastic. If you go through the Haunted Mansion at Disney, loads of that's Pepper's Ghost. But basically, it's projecting images which appear to be in thin air, but they're not. They're on sheets and things like that. And I have lots of clear sheet for doing very scary stuff. That's one of the things I do. I do lots of experimentation with various items. The simulator behind me is one of the bigger ones. One of the big ones I did do a while ago, and one of the ones that I know Jason's seen and a lot of other people have seen, and it came up, and I got quite a bit of flack for doing it, is I built a VR electric chair, an actual chair that would actually electrocute people, and then hooked it up to VR and gave them an entire experience. And what I did is, this is all done in Unity, connected through an Arduino that would then actually shock people. And here's one of the GIFs of it actually running and shocking this poor woman who was actually in it as it goes. This is on a loop, by the way. This is like, she wasn't being shocked for like a continual
Non-stop
piece for an awful long time. No, this is a little GIF on a loop. But the idea behind it, if you go down to the bottom right there, that guy there, you walk up to a room. You can't see in the room. All you see outside is a red light and a big drop switch. The sort of things you see in the horror movies and stuff like that, where they electrocute people. And what would happen is, you turn up in the queue, you walk up, and there's a big sign just below that switch that says, "When red light shows, pull switch." So you wait there and you're anticipating. You know there's an electric chair experiment in there, because it was a showcase piece at this particular conference that I was asked to do it for. The red light goes off, you pull the switch, and suddenly you hear a scream coming from the other room. You're like, what have I just done? And it becomes apparent when somebody walks out kind of shaking, because they've just been in the experience. And you walk in and you see the electric chair. And then suddenly you're realizing, yeah, I just pulled the switch on somebody who was in the electric chair in the other room. Now, what this actually did is, you get into the experience, you put on the VR headset, and suddenly you're in an electrocution chamber. Now, like many of these sort of experiences, you want them to be fairly short. So this thing only lasted a few minutes. You've got a little bit of backstory as you're sitting there. And then the curtains open up in front of you, and there's a viewing gallery of faceless people watching you in the chair. And at a certain point, you see a character in the corner walk in, the lights start coming on, you hear all the revving coming up of all the generators, etc. And then a red light comes on. And this is where a bit of a psychological experiment plays out, where suddenly you go, oh, red light, drop switch, I just done that outside and somebody shocked me. And the realization comes to you that you're actually about to be shocked yourself. And then obviously somebody outside pulls it. I would often go outside and stop people from pulling it for a second to make you wait a little bit longer in the chair to then get electrocuted, just to build it up to people that are a little bit obnoxious when they turned up about doing it. There are other things going on here. She's actually wearing a haptic vest. And what I would actually do is I would pump through a very low audio channel to that haptic vest that actually replicated a heartbeat. So when you start off the experience, it's going quite slow, a normal sort of heartbeat rhythm. And then during the experience, I would actually speed it up and bring it down and then speed it up again. And the reason for this is you would feel like your heart was beating out your chest, but it really wasn't. Obviously, I get everybody to sign quite a big waiver when they start off, but it builds up the anticipation as well. There's also a strobe light. These old VR headsets, they had a lot of light leak, so I'd have a strobe light underneath, so you would think that there was some extra light going on. Also, behind this person is actually a sheet that goes over the window that actually let some light through. So when somebody actually pulled the switch, they actually saw the strobe light going off in the other room, which gave it more of the impression. The electrocution itself is very, very low. If you've ever been around somebody who had one of those chewing gum shockers from back in the day that would give you a shock using basically a very small battery that you put in a watch, it's the same sort of level as that, and it wouldn't hurt you at all. Some people asked to be strapped down into the experience. There were straps for it if you wanted to go hardcore. And there was a low, medium, and high sort of electrocution that came with it. But it was a super fun experiment, done really well at this show. And it all came from a hackathon that I went to and pitched to people from the year previous. So yeah, it was a great experience. Everybody seemed to like it. I've been asked to remake it a lot of times. When I actually finished this, I destroyed the entire thing because I didn't want it going out to anywhere else. I was done with it. I spent a long time being shocked myself to test it and make sure it was good enough to go into the experiences. So I'd had enough of doing that. So I broke it all down and I never brought it back. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago, somebody asked me to redo it. And I said, yes, in the next few years, I'll basically redo it. And I'll put up the videos and all the rest on the channel to basically show people how I actually build these experiences. And if you go on the channel, you'll see some of the stuff about Arduinos that I use and how I connect them to Unity and how I talk to the Arduino to basically give people these sort of experiences, whether that be from the backlighting on my computer, which is basically controlled by an Arduino that I custom make, or these sort of much larger experiences that people go into, or through all the way to the Arduinos that sit in the simulator that control the motion, how it goes through.
This thing was crazy. I remember getting in there and trying it out and just being kind of amazed, especially the haptic vest part really added a lot to it. It's more than I think you can explain. Like the feeling that you got from that, it made you kind of feel like you were about to actually get electrocuted. It was kind of crazy. Even though I knew it was fake, I was still kind of freaking out in there the whole time. And I saw lots of people just scream and like total freakouts. It was kind of funny. I'm sure you got lots of funny videos of that though.
Yeah, I even put a bass kicker under the seat itself that actually linked to the whole thing, so you felt the thing coming through the entire chair. But yeah, it was a good, fun time to build. And we took it, as I say, we took it to a few shows. Everybody seemed to like it. We got on the front page of OC Register. I got a lot of flack from people saying that it was a bad way to introduce people to virtual reality. But to them, I say, I don't care. I really enjoyed making it. And everybody that walked away had a really good time experiencing it. So it didn't do any harm. It only done good.
My hot take back in the... Go on.
It's a cool concept. I was going to say, it reminds me of the movie The Box. I don't know if you've seen it, but I think The Box is based on an older movie, I think, but where a couple gets $1 million. If they just open this box, they get $1 million, and somebody that they don't know will die. And
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
wasn't there?
Was that the one with Cameron Diaz? There was like a remake she made that one.
Yeah. And I'm going to spoil it, so, But at the end, they take the $1 million, and the guy comes and takes the box back, and they say, what happens to the box now? He says, well, it's going to go to another person that you don't know. And the implication is they're going to be the next ones to die if the other person opens the box and takes the money.
Oh.
So.
Yeah.
Push that button.
The horror theme in virtual reality is quite good. If you move away from the jump scares, because I find them incredibly boring when you play a game and, this thing's come out of me again.
Low hanging fruit too, yeah.
It works once, and then the rest of the game you're like, this is just a really rubbish exploration game. There are some that do really well. There was a stream I watched the other day where a guy is walking around a corridor and it just loops on itself, but every time something changes in the corridor and the horror experience gets more and more, and Yeah, that just looked quite intense as it went through, and I really enjoyed that. I'd done a concept for a group a while back, and it was based on The Cabin in the Woods. And if you've ever watched that film, there's one point where they go down in the lift and they're introduced to all the sorts of monsters you expect to see, you know, scary clown, werewolf, vampire, all the rest. And they go down this lift and they're put in front of all these different creatures that are behind a glass mirror. And one of the things I basically concepted with that was you would go down and you'd be introduced to 3 random scary creatures, whether that be clown and getting your clownophobia on, or whether that being, you know, a werewolf or something that was trying to scratch through zombies, a big packed group of zombies. And what I was doing when people went down is I was testing to see how their hand movement and their head movement was happening in the actual VR. So I would see what gave them the most impact they were sitting in front of. So they don't know this, but I'm testing that every time they go to a different floor. And then I bring them right back up to the top and then I drop them, not too fast, obviously, because it's VR, down to the one that scared them the most and lift up the glass and have the thing come at them. It's that sort of thing that enables you to test the psychological level of the person that's actually in the experience. And that's one of the things from the electric chair, that sort of lift experiment, and a couple of others I've done in the past. There was a great experience very early on in virtual reality, and it was a guillotine. And you would get into this guillotine, you would bend over, you'd be in it, and you'd be sitting there wondering when the guillotine was going to chop your head off. Now, in a guillotine, you can imagine you're looking forwards. You can't see anything. And in most virtual reality, if you haven't got a big, you know, electric chair or anything like that, you can't actually feel something happening to you. So what this developer done, which was quite ingenious, is they had you stay there forever. You could just lay there wondering when the hell this film's going to go off. And eventually you get bored. So you turn around to look back at the guillotine. And what happens is, as soon as you look at the blade, it drops and takes your head off. And it freaks everybody out that does it. I've never seen anyone be able to just sit through that and not get completely freaked out. And again, it's that psychological edge. It's that level of interaction that they put into that made that execution simulator just really, really clever how they did that.
This sort of like interactive VR stuff was a big part of early VR, so I did a lot of this stuff as well. There was a really fun example. We had a game jam project where you had a big giant creature like a titan behind you, and there'd be a rumbling sound, and we would check which direction you look. Do you look to your left or do you look to your right? And then whichever direction you look, we'd play one of 2 animations, which would drop a giant foot, kind of like a dinosaur style slow motion step over you on that side, so it would match the angle with which you were looking, because again, these things are really interesting. And my personal favorite example is I was trying to explain this to somebody once, and I came up with this idea that I never got around to doing, but I thought would be a cool project. Is I like the idea of you on a boat going on some adventure. And then the idea would be that as you're sitting on the boat, you'd be looking out at the horizon, and there'd be like a castle on a hill, a small village, and then a dark cave in front of you. And you just let that play out for a minute or two. And what you can do, it's very simple. It's kind of amazing how much data you get from a person just sitting there. Just count the ticks of gaze tracking. How long are they looking towards the cave versus the mountain versus the village? And over time, you'll get a sense of, because people are going to be naturally curious. And if they're kind of going, oh, I wonder who lives in the castle, ooh, that cave looks scary. Over time, one of them will have more attention than the others. And so you, just by watching them, will know which one they're most interested in. And you can passively move them in that direction. And I had a similar idea of having like some gladiatorial arena that the character is being dragged through as a prisoner. And as they do, they pass the treasury. And the treasury is this big giant room full of all these interesting artifacts. And then you just pause there for a second because someone's blocking the way or something, and you let them look around the room. And again, you track which object they look at, and then just by coincidence, the object with which they found the most visually interesting turns out to be the prize of whatever thing that they're about to do, right? And so there's a lot of really interesting stuff. Similarly, there's another one about wolves fighting, and then which wolf do you want to win? And so you're watching back and forth, and you can kind of... obviously, these aren't guarantees, but what they do is you can do interesting things to augment the experience relative to subconscious cues that someone is giving you based on attention. And I guess as a final example, another one we kind of played with as an idea was a bank robbery. And the robber is like basically holding everyone at gunpoint and everyone's kneeled down. And then the idea would be, do you hold the gaze of the robber? Like, do you stare them down? And if you do, that's a different kind of personality, someone who's going to be looking right in the eyes of someone saying eyes down or I will shoot you. And so you get a very good sense of the kind of person and what kind of experience they're trying to do without a dialogue wheel, right? You can tell, do they feel like the kind of person who wants to be combative against the narrative being put here or not? And so you can start to craft a different story relative to whether they're playing along or not playing along, right? So there's a lot of really interesting ways of using that stuff.
Yeah,
That
it can go back to
reminds
even
me.
games like Resident Evil, where I worked with a guy from one of the Resident Evil franchises, and in the game itself, you had to paint a house, and you had to do various interactions as you were going through the game. And then when you got to the end of the game, the house was there, and it's how you painted it in this picture way back. And there's all these other cues of you doing things, and where you looked the most, where you stayed the most, would come up more in the end. Yeah, it's all that little data you can pick up all the way through that really adds to the actual end experience.
There was a movie, a VR movie. This was way back when I went to the Oculus One Connect way back before it was Facebook / Meta / whatever. And there was a bunch of people making different cinematic experiences with VR, and it was very new and it was wild, wild west. Nobody knew what to do. But the best experience I saw at that point, and I don't know if people are doing this today because I don't have a device and all that. It was a live action, and you start the scene. There's a couple in bed, which is already kind of okay. You're floating above them, looking down. They're in bed. They're talking. They're having maybe a fight, maybe a conversation. Who knows? And then she gets out of the bed and walks away, and she stands at the door, and they do have a back and forth dialogue. So now you have to choose. You have to look back. He's here. She's over there. And depending on who you're looking at, the scene will change to either her view or his view for the next portion of it. But you don't know that. So it's almost like a choose your own adventure without knowing that you're choosing it. And it's just a seamless cut to the next scene without knowing that because you're looking at him or because you're looking at her, you're going to get a different perspective of the story. And I thought that was a really neat way of just having that like interest in a dialogue and in a conversation that you could kind of experience and just without thinking about how you're experiencing it.
Yeah, there's even bringing on from there, there's a point in Half-Life Alyx, and you can watch this on YouTube if you haven't got a VR headset or anything, but you're in a lift and it's very, very early on and it's teaching you about interactions and all the rest. And there's two guards out there and they're taking away your father. And you can press the buttons on the lift and you can go to grab the gun that the guard is having. And everything you do has a reaction in the world for where you are. And it's a masterclass in just how to actually do interaction in virtual reality. In fact, I played that for about an hour and then took the headset off and immediately came over to the computer and started recoding the way some of my interactions were happening in my VR games. Because I wanted to have the hand blending and stuff like that that Half-Life have. When you go to pick something up, your hand blends around the object and picks it up, which is actually relatively easy to do in Unity. If you've done blending of animations, you can set triggers on your mechanism system to say, okay, I've entered this trigger and my hand should blend to this shape and I'm moving into this thing, so I'll lerp into that position. And as long as it's not lerping your hand all the way across the screen or anything like that, small lerps and things like this are really easy to implement, and you can get really good interactions where your hand manipulates around the object and you're rotating it and positioning it into the point and it's blending in the animation. So you feel like you're picking something up. It's not just going, I've pressed the trigger, now my hand goes like this, and now I've got it in my hand at this particular point. You're blending into there and picking it up. And I show some of this in the videos that I do on the channel where it is all about that blending, especially with the simulator where you're grabbing the joystick to then do the firing in the turret. I show how you actually go in and grab the joystick. And then when you're actually doing the firing, you can see the trigger doing the 1-to-1 because all the controllers that you have in VR have this 0-to-1 on the trigger. So you can blend the finger like this. And in Mechanim, you can actually say, this is the value and this is what I want to blend between.
That was one of the first things I ever did in VR. It's back when we were using the controllers were either the Razer Hydra or when they first came out with the Vive wands. And it really infuriated me that everyone was using the default sample template thing you got. And so my friend Nick and I, the first thing we did is made a custom controller. And the main reason is I tied all of the on button down, on button up, and everything. So the trigger would physically trigger relative to the movement. There would be an indicator on the touchpad that would show you where the point is relative to where your finger is touching, because the controller is giving you all of this information, but it was never really visualized back then on the controller. And it made such a difference when you could actually hold the controller up to your eyes and pull the trigger and then watch it gradiate in the same way as you're pressing it. That those kinds of little things really do make a difference.
I just want to say there's a lot of insights I got today just from hearing about how much manual work you actually do with determining what the players are most interested with in the VR. Especially saying that you watch them in real time and switch things for them in the experience for the glass window bit. I never heard of that being done before, so it's really nice.
It also works in reverse too, right? Like people are well aware of culling, but culling is obviously for the camera, but it's also the same with players' attention span. And there's a lot of really interesting things about. So this is getting into a whole big side rant, but I think it's an interesting relative topic. I've complained before about the idea that I think a lot of games aren't really games; they're just either books or movies with extra steps, because people kind of don't use what a game is in their game. Likewise, how a book is a story, but the difference between a book and a movie is the visual medium. It's the ability to frame the information. And you start getting into stuff like Kuleshov effects and the interconnection of multiple scenes, and there's a different language that happens in between those two. And the bit when it comes to VR versus other games that people don't take into account is you are trying to direct a narrative without having control of the camera. That is what makes VR the interesting challenge, is that how do you tell a story when the literal thing pointing at the story is not in your control? And so a lot of this stuff comes down to how do you structure a scene so that you get players' attention? And you realize it has to start being psychological tricks. So people are like, oh, it sounds like you're tricking the player. You have to, because the point is, you want to have a moment of interest in a scene. And unlike other games, you can't go the Gears of War route and have the press A to rotate the camera to face the interesting thing. You have to draw the attention of the person playing. And that often means you have to have sound effects, and you have to understand how sound effects play into players' attention. Or you have to use level design and lighting to frame things so that players will organically look at what you want them to. And then when it comes to the gaze tracking, you have to start doing things where you turn off the things that would be interesting. That's why a lot of games have this sort of like half moon shape, where they actively, like if you take an average VR game and you zoom out and you look at the map, you'll notice the background is considerably more boring than the foreground. And that's not that they're hiding stuff, it's that they're actively engaged. They're trying to subconsciously tell you behind you's boring, unless it's not meant to be, in which case they'll move you into a space and they will actively put interesting things behind you as an incentive to look behind. So there's like a lot of level design, cinematography, and stuff that you have to do because the rules are different. Filmmaking knows its rules. There's specific things. There's lower third shots. There's the cowboy shot. There's specific, like, if you say I have a scene in a movie and I want the player to feel the viewer to feel uncomfortable, or I want to express that this person is isolated, there's literal shots. There are shots in filmmaking that indicate certain emotions or intents or visual stylings, and that language has not been written for VR. That's what always interests me most about VR, is that we don't know the rules yet. What is the cinematographic toolbox you have to tell a story in VR? And so a lot of us, we're just making this stuff up. We were just doing our research in other fields and trying to apply it into VR. And it leads to a lot of really interesting stuff where you have to try to figure these out for yourself. And again, talk about experiments. Back in the early days of VR, you would just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. And one of my favorite experiments that really highlighted that there's value in this is I tried to copy things I liked, and one of them was from Doctor Who, you have the Weeping Angels, which are just one of the most amazingly horrifying concepts of a creature in anything ever. It got worse in the later ones where they actually like ruined the mystique of them, but in the early ones when it was just the concept, it was much more interesting. And so I made my own, and it's like, how do you make something like that in VR? A lot of people just do look detection, but it's much more interesting. I realized if you had a creature behind you and you spawned a audio source invisibly on an object and you just slowly interpolated that audio source towards their ear, you would hear it coming towards you, but you turn around and it wouldn't have moved. And then the idea would be when that audio source got halfway between you and it would teleport the distance. So it was always moving closer, never as close as the sound source, and the sound source always moved towards your ear. So you never felt comfortable, because if you looked away long enough, you would start to hear motion, but every time you looked back, it wouldn't move unless you ignored it for long enough that it would then start to come after you, and you'd have to pay attention and kind of balance the two. And this stuff is really fascinating because you really got to understand how you control a player's perception in VR. You don't control what they look at, but you have complete control over what they see and how they engage with the space. And so there's a lot of really interesting experiments to be run in how does that tell a good story effectively. So yeah, it's a fun topic.
It is, and I did a video on like the way the turret turns on. So you're sitting inside the turret on a spaceship, ready to start shooting things, and the order in which things turn on have you engaging in certain items, and the lights aren't on to start off with, and then they come on where the joysticks are, and then you actually start putting the little screens on the joysticks and you make noises towards that so that people start engaging with that direction, and then they engage with the joystick and that turns extra stuff on and that brings more in. And I learned a lot from building interactive tutorials for VR training as well, where we're teaching people how to use complex machinery in real life and having those cues and having those systems in place. And you can tell if a game developer's working on VR training or it's somebody that's just been doing the stuff at the location and then learned Unity to build VR training. Because all these techniques, like you're talking about there, Jason, and like I've mentioned previously, they're all in the really good ones where you've got a gameplay engineer working on these elements to bring these people in. And it works a lot better. And just going through using that in all the tutorials you make in games where they're all interactive, you don't put these big boards up that give you loads of instructions that people forget or skip or whatever, that you build the interaction level in there to actually bring them across is what makes a great game.
There are so many things that have to go in a games or a tutorials design that are glossed over, especially in applications that aren't made as games. And it's a real shame because we just discussed this in Jason's server recently, but there's a video about how invisible tutorials are glorified. And there are a lot of tricks that go beyond just an invisible tutorial in order to have a good experience that you learn from and is respectful to you as a good memory later on.
Yeah, I do think it's so many moving parts, and I think one thing people miss a lot is they learn their field, but they don't learn the relative other fields. And something I've said before regarding the whole games are art argument is like, without getting really deep into that, the fact of the matter is, whether or not games as a composite you believe are as art, they literally contain art. Games contain audio and video and all the other parts that would traditionally be constituted as art are inside of a video game. And so what a lot of people I think miss is they learn games, but they don't learn filmmaking. And if you don't learn filmmaking, you'll never know how to compose a shot. And composing a shot is how you play a game. You're composing scenes. And that's where you start getting into stuff like first reads and your points of interests and how do you draw someone's eye. The reason people look at games like Left 4 Dead, not Left 4 Dead, like Last of Us, and they remember these moments is because that game is steeped in filmmaking. Like that game is a film. Now, at large parts of that, it's structured with like a lot of knowledge on how films are made. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff. You have to learn these other related fields. Same with the writing, right? How do you write a good story? Well, first you learn how to write a good story, regardless of games, and then you apply that logic, and then you alter it based on the features that your particular medium gives you. So I kind of think there's a major misunderstanding. People think you can just make games. It's like, unfortunately, if you're picking games, you are picking everything that goes before it. To make games, you need to, whether it's you or not, can be a different story, but you need to understand audio before you can make games with good audio in it, right? And to do that, you need to hire somebody, or you need to go down the road yourself and learn what leitmotifs are and how the different audio, the ambiences affect things. And like, it's such a huge field of things to learn.
As far as actually implementing the medium into stories or what have you, there's a lot of misusage of you're clicking buttons, therefore you are playing a game, where the buttons actually have to matter and you actually have to have the ability to do more than just advancing the story. Because when you have only the option to advance a story, you're playing a visual novel. That's why we have the actual category in the stores for it.
That's how I feel most mobile tutorials are. I hate every single one of them. I'm just clicking a bunch of buttons that I don't know what they are or why, just to get on to the next step, so that it'll tell me the next button with a big giant fucking arrow to click on. Speaking of tutorials, though, this kind of ties into something you were talking about in chat, and one of the other things I want to talk about, which was the New World tutorial. So New World was one of the things I want to talk about today, but they actually had a relatively good, I thought, somewhat seamless beginner tutorial built into the game. Like you went through, you played through, and it was relatively seamless. As far as an MMO tutorial goes, it was one of the better ones that I've seen. I've seen quite a few of them. Usually they're pretty bad with a bunch of text telling you the instructions that were half written out at the last second. And this one seemed pretty good, but the game itself seems to have some other interesting things going on, and I just kind of wanted to chat about that with you guys, get everybody's thoughts and opinions on what's going on there, why it's going on, and just I think have a little discussion. And I think Yora had some interesting info about it too. So have you guys been keeping up with what's going on with New World? For everybody that doesn't know, by the way, it's the new MMO using Amazon's Lumberyard engine, which used to be CryEngine and then got converted over to Lumberyard. And I think it might be something else now. And it's built, I forget which company it was. It was another company building it and then published by Amazon. I've lost track of too many companies now. But they've been having some issues lately. So have you guys been keeping up on it and seeing what's going on there?
Yes.
I
And it is
don't know
very
about the issues.
exciting. So it depends on which issues you want to talk about, but there's plenty to go.
Yeah, there are definitely quite a few.
Yeah. So do you want to go in chronological order or?
Yeah, let's hit them in chronological order. Let's hit the ones that popped up first. So the first kind of issues that they were seeing.
So I think the first major one was abilities didn't work as advertised, and some of them started doing wonky things depending on player inputs, or rather client inputs. So to start with, in a game where you have PvP, you're expected to have a reliable system where if the game tells you this does this much damage, you expect this much damage to happen. But what happened is there are a lot of frame overlaps for certain AoE abilities, and they dealt more damage than they had to because some clients ran in a different FPS from what I understood, and they would damage twice or more than. So that got the PvP in a wonk. And then there were healing fields where you could crouch to essentially heal yourself again. It acted as if you're a new target for the healing every time you crouched and uncrouched. So people would just spam crouch in a healing field and get many times the heals they should have. So that's two things about state. But then we got to the really big issue where some players figured out in PvP where if you move the game window around, which in many applications would freeze the application, you become invulnerable to damage and unmovable. And that means you cannot be moved from a capture area, you cannot be killed, you can win a war simply by dragging a window around for 30 minutes.
Wow.
So Jason, do you want to explain how that happens and how really bad it is?
That one's yeah. The first issues I can see that they somewhat make sense. They're the kinds of things that happen a lot in systems. I could understand. Well, maybe not the frame rate one. It seems like there's just a lot going on that's just client authoritative, though. For some reason, like
Exactly.
Now they have said that they have fought this. So just by the way, for note, they have said specifically it is not client authoritative. They've claimed that they said that the rules and the physics are being run server side. Obviously, there's something going on wrong. So I don't
Right.
think it's entirely, but obviously there's a level of client control that shouldn't be there. But they're definitely fighting that specific term because they're trying to avoid the connotations of, quite frankly, stupidity. So.
Right, and it's probably more like it's in some state. They probably have some state check against the client to make sure that bad things don't happen, and then that's fucking up. right? Like it's checking to make sure that they're actually connected and that you're not killing a disconnected player or something. And then when it's locked in that and it's never sending the network messages, it's thinking they're disconnected or something. It wouldn't surprise me at all if it just doesn't kill them until it like gets their next message, and then that message doesn't send out until they stop dragging the window around or something. There's all kinds of different things that could be causing it, but it does seem like they're definitely trusting the client at all. I mean, really, realistically, you got to just always never trust the fucking client on anything. Is just the number one rule. Just assume that everything from the client is bad. Everything going to every player from any client is bad. That their name has bad characters and is a SQL injection hack, and everything else. You got to just
the
kind of
main one:
expect
sanitize your inputs. Sanitize your inputs. And the one that
Yeah,
is, I think, one of the biggest ones too. And this is actually, I guarantee you, like if you played 50 random games in your Steam library, a lot of them will have this one particular thing. 'Cause it's so small. Nobody caps the character limit on names of things that you can name in game. So an example of this, whether you're playing Subnautica or Satisfactory or any other game where there is a thing you can make or place and name it, theme park games, any of them, I guarantee you can probably just hold the A button and create thousands of characters and create a single mesh that's huge, because nobody ever thinks someone's going to go and make a 5,000 character named thing. It's a very easy one line check to do, but again, comes down to sanitize your inputs. If you let players input anything, decide what the mins and maxes are and limit out various characters. But and that one again, that's such a small one that if anyone here is working on a game, I bet you haven't thought of it. I bet if there's a single place in the game where a player can type in a name for something, you have allowed them to type in an infinitely sized name thing. And if you've done that, it doesn't seem like a big deal. It might look silly in the UI, but if you keep doing that, the mesh sizes are generating much larger. It's going to eat the memory and will crash your game. It doesn't seem like a big deal to say, oh, I forgot to put a character limit on a name. You can crash your game with that. And that's the tip of the iceberg of the kind of stuff we're talking about.
Yeah,
I actually have experience with that in Terraria.
Yeah, there's a YouTuber. There's a YouTuber called Let's Game It Out. And
Let's Game It Out. It's so much fun. I love that show.
He goes in and he fills those fields up so often. And as a game developer, you just cringe as you watch him crash a game just by filling out a field. It's good.
In Terraria, we had player names that were restricted to about 40 characters, I think, at the time. And then around 1.3 update 2015, we added item tags in chat. So we rewrote the entire chat system to have snippets of certain types, and there were item tags, and there were button prompt tags, etc., etc. But we didn't sanitize player names. So what happened is players could start color tagging their name, and then no matter what team they were in PvP or whatever, they always had the same color. So they could act as an imposter because you see the player name over their head as they go around with you. And that was a very unfortunate mistake that we had to fix. There was also a case where you could put item icons in another game in a chat, but you could also name your items. And if you named your item with the item tag, it would actually turn the item into the new the item that you input. So as soon as you got the feature to rename weapons, you could just name the weapon as the end game one and get the strongest weapon in the game.
That's a good feature.
I think it also happens in Stardew Valley, where if you name your character after an item or an ID, every time you get your name said, you get the item added into your inventory or something like that. There was the Spiff and Brit, if you know that. He makes a lot of exploit videos, so he named his character after something that gives energy, I think it was. Was hilarious to watch.
Fall Guys also had the same problem with the names. You could use color tags inside the names and create really long, horrible names. And literally, it got so funny. You could create names that were so long, the mesh would override the size of buttons, and you weren't able to click certain buttons in your UI because a member of one of the characters on screen's name was too long that it blocked the buttons. It's ridiculous.
That's great.
There was not hackers, but you could call it a social hack, but where people would name their character in Xbox the wake word to basically turn off your Xbox. And then people were actually playing the games and they go, oh no, so-and-so killed me. And suddenly they get disconnected because they were using the wake word from the Xbox to basically do that.
And there's tons of these. One of my favorites as well is Discord. So Discord renders videos. If you drop a video in and it plays it, there's a video out there that you can get, or you can just make your own really. But there's a really fun example of one where a character slaps the screen, and when they slap the screen, it crashes Discord. You're like, what? And it's like, so what happens is the video is declaring itself as a different resolution than the size of the video, and then partway through the video, the resolution changes, and so the various basically the byte sizes are changing. Then it's causing it to crap out, and then the whole of Discord crashes. And they've timed it so the character slaps you. So there's a video of a character who looks at you, slaps the screen, and crashes
That's
Discord.
brilliant.
It's fantastic.
That's great. So there's some more stuff with crashes with New World, right?
Yeah. So we talked about how if you move the window around, you essentially became invulnerable. But the developers quickly decided, okay, we'll fix this by making the game crash if you move the window. So then you can't play windowed mode in a proper position for your setup anymore because it has to be exactly where it spawned the window. And people figured out that you can still move it if you were rolling, I think, as you were doing it, which was baffling to me to read. I'm not sure if it actually happened this way, but this is how I understood it was going on. So they would be able to also defy gravity by doing this. So if they rolled in midair and they were moving the window, they just stood in the air waiting until the window came back. Yeah, beyond that, I think they added server migrations after this one, and it resulted in an issue where the character state could not be written properly for a few hours. And while your character was in that state, no matter what you did, as soon as you logged out and logged back in, you lost your progress from that moment. So people started giving their gold out, logging out and logging in, and duplicating gold. And that one, they addressed that they have the tools to track and that they will lock characters out from being logged. They will lock characters from being logged into while they're in that state until it's solved. I think that was the resolution for that one.
I wonder what happened. So they merged servers over and moved characters over, and then the characters just got in some jacked up state and they can't save. I wonder what they use for their back end for persistence. That's weird.
I'm not sure myself, but the characters, I think people pay for the transition. So it was a really small amount of players that actually wanted to pay to move server really early on in the process until this was figured out, and what happened. Now we're gonna get into the biggest issue with New World right now that's going around, and it is their chat. And their chat runs HTML. And the tags in that HTML are not sanitized at all, which means you can put anything you want in there as long as it's game assets or code that the game runs. And it will run the requests as needed and do whatever you tell it to. So one day, someone posted an image of a giant sausage in the chat. Everybody had a good laugh about what's going on, and they started figuring out what to do with it.
And this giant sausage is like taking up most of the screen, right? It's like you got your little chat window, and now it's this big picture of a sausage, right? It's not just
I have
it's on screen.
I have a GIF for it. Yeah. One moment.
And by the way, I feel like it's been a long time since we've pulled out the old meme. These reasons are why whenever someone says, should I make an MMO? My answer is no. Because it's not down to any individual single thing. It's if you've got large companies with lots of people who are having difficulties with these little niche things, you will have them and you won't have the team and resources to deal with them. So I'm not saying don't ever make an MMO. I'm saying if it's your first game, don't make an MMO. Because this kind of things will happen.
Save it for your second game.
Yeah, there you go. If you got a successful game, then go for it. You can take that risk afterwards.
So there was the giant sausage initially, and then people started to figure out they can do random things. So they started exploring the extents of what's possible, and they got some corrupted messages, which would make the chat go colored, or just make a big colored square covering the entire chat area. And you'd think that's bad, but then there were places where some piece of your chat would actually go to other parts of the UI. So 80% of your screen would go for that color square. And that was hilarious. But then something way worse happened, which is people discovered that there are quest prompts that show you item icons. And if you click them, you get the item as the reward. And someone put that in chat. And every time someone checked that tag, they got the reward for the quest, even though they weren't eligible for it. So they could
That
just
is fine,
generate.
authoritative. Call it what
Yeah,
you
so
want.
even if it's a server authoritative, the server gets the request of, hey, give me this item button, and it doesn't check the quest state. The problem is still huge.
Wait, it
And
shouldn't even
then
be saying "give me that." It should be saying, "Hey, I turned this thing in," not "give me this
Yeah.
item and am I eligible for it?" It seems like it's a. But
Yeah, it
it's
should
not
be
like I
click.
haven't done the same mistakes, right? Like I don't want to say like hey, every game I've worked on has had just as bad of issues or worse.
It should be realistically that you're saying, I am picking an option, and the server would go, well, can you actually pick an option here? Is this option valid for you? Okay, sure, I'll run the code that's related to the option. But that clearly wasn't happening. So after that one was a bigger one where you could create corrupted tags and not much would happen. But if you created corrupted tags that refer to game assets and the game asset didn't exist, the game would crash. And you could paste it in chat, and until you actually hover over it, nothing bad would happen. So now chat is really unsafe because anyone can tag anything bad. As soon as someone doesn't understand and hovers over it, their game crashes. I don't think there were more exploits that I'm aware of, but feel free to fill in.
Now, is this just a really good marketing ploy to get everybody talking about the game?
I doubt it. We were talking about it before. And
Maybe not the game crashes, but
Yeah,
yeah.
there's just so many weird issues. I mean, it happens when you release an MMO. It's gonna get hit hard. You got to test the shit out of it before and watch out for these things. I think with this, a lot of it seems like is just issues around the whole chat system in general. Probably trying to pull in some library that made it really able to do a bunch of HTML shit, but then also kind of overextended the capabilities. And when it comes to these games, like you're saying, there's going to be a giant team of people with all different skill sets, and sometimes you get assigned to work on some shit you're not that familiar with, or some shit just goes wrong. Like I don't know. I look back at like all of the games I've worked on and seen like the ones where you could just submit in like, hey, I'd like to deposit a negative amount of money into the bank real quick and just send that over as a message and you get back a bunch of money. That was an actual bug in Vanguard. It's one of the ones I remember finding fixing. There are lots of things like that. It's not uncommon where stuff gets checked somewhere.
And again, like there's some of these become legendary, and like some of them are pretty small, but yeah, they will always happen. And I think the more you go into game dev stuff, the more you start to be a bit more lenient to these kinds of things happening, because you realize how easy it is for a simple thing like that to have a large effect. Like some of the examples being, when you're developing, you have to have some way to test things quickly. So there's always some debug mode or some test scene or something. And one of the more famous examples for Fallout with the online one, there was just a demo room, which is just a demo scene which had all of the things just for testing. And as soon as players figured out they could just teleport themselves into that room, pick up all of the stuff they want and leave, they could now sell it. And then, of course, you've now got the issue where it's like, let's purge accounts that sell it. Well, then all you need to do is set up a small black market where you have people passing things between different accounts to keep things live. Probably the most famous example of that, though, would have been the Blood Curse one for World of Warcraft. That is like the most famous example of a something going wrong. And if you haven't heard of that one, it's one of the most amazing stories ever, to the point that it's like it's used as research for how virality works. Like it's become a known quantity of like, this represents how malicious actors could spread viruses. And so the idea was there was a boss character. I think it was like a Lich King or something, and the idea was there was an attack which would poison your character and it would tick down your health. Now it's a relatively mid to late game character, so it would do a lot of damage with the tick in order for it to be relatively bad. But people realized they could be hit with this and then just leave. They could just teleport away and they would still have this poison effect on them. And the thing is, it's AoE. It would affect anybody near you would get affected by this thing that you've got. So what people could do is they could teleport to a low level town and just stand there. And all these players walking by them would just die instantly because they're being hit by this blood poison thing. And that's fine. Obviously, it doesn't last very long. You can heal it and whatever. But people realized because of the way the game worked, you could infect NPCs, and NPCs can't die. So you could just take a scroll through a village, infect all of the people, all the quest givers, and leave. And now that entire town is poison. Nobody can go near the town without dying instantly. And so panic. They have to try to resolve this, right? And like they try to scrub the server. But so they ended up like doing so much to reset things. But what players were doing is players would infect their own pets, and then they would store their pets in the inventory so that when the game wiped and they cleared the virus, they could pull the pet back out of the inventory and re-poison everybody. And so it became this like fascinating example of how people can keep this going, and you could study its growth as it went through different parts of the map. So yeah, it could be worse. Put it that way. A bit of text issues in one thing, literally making a game unplayable for everybody, probably considerably worse.
Yeah, and I think those text issues were something that had happened in WoW in the past too, right? It had similar types of problems, and I think almost every game that I've worked on that had some sort of text thing had at least some exploits in there where they were doing shit with the HTML. Usually not to the point where you're getting free gold or crashing other players, but I've seen lots of bad things happen in there.
Sometimes you don't even have to have HTML there. Maple Story, if you ever play that, was a relative. It's an MMO to the action game, RPG game, and they had the ability to drop coins on the floor. Now, you could list how much coins you want with a text box, and if you try to put a negative number, obviously it will tell you you can't. But the number that you put there was actually used as an integer. So if you tried to put a number over 2 billion, it would actually go into the negatives. And if you assign a number that's even bigger than that, you could actually drop tons of gold on the floor that you didn't have, and it would work perfectly fine because you didn't give a negative number to the server, it just casted it into a negative number. And it was fantastic. There were people. One day I was going around one of the towns in the game, and people were just dropping coins on the floor en masse. It would lag the entire screen because of how many coins were on the floor.
Yeah, those number of wrapping ones, I've seen those happen quite a few times, especially with ints or bytes. There'd be people that store stuff in bytes and they'd end up just wrapping right over, or lots with unsigned ints that would just wrap over that weren't longs for numbers for things all the time, or 16-bit ints, the worst. And they'd end up just wrapping over. And yeah, you'd check them in one spot, but not the other. They'd check like one thing on the server, one thing on the client, and not match up and break shit all the time.
In Terraria, we had a case where, so if you didn't play Terraria, it's a 2D game, has randomly generated worlds, and every 16 by 16 pixels is a block. So the world is composed about, a large world in the game is composed about 20 million blocks. Now, naturally, that's going to take a lot of memory, so we try to really tone down how many bytes we assign for any property of a tile. One of these properties is the tile's ID. For example, dirt, stone, air, leaves, etc. And at one point, we had to expand this ID because we were adding more content to the game, and we maxed out the amount of IDs a byte can have. So we turned that into a ushort, an unsigned short, and that gave us a lot more options. But the entire code was casting ints to bytes, and suddenly half our game code would start turning new blocks into stone or dirt or what have you, and we would load out and log back in, and the entire world was corrupted, and it was hell to undo all of that because the game was constructed with a lot of repeated code. Let's call it that. A lot of it.
Lots to
and
update.
then and then we thought we figured it all out, and we had a good time for another 2 years. And then suddenly we ran into the same issue with walls, because we added more walls to the game, and we needed to do the entire process all over again. Be careful of how you access small data types.
Yeah, how you
It's
store
actually,
that
if you
stuff.
want a great example of this stuff, it's just look at speedrunning. Like, speedrunning is one of the, especially any glitch run speedrun for any game, is a masterclass in how things can go wrong. Because obviously it's not really superintended, but like for example, the fact that it's only been very recently that the Zelda Ocarina of Time dupe trick has been found, to the point where you can literally clone any item. That it's be kind of, in a way, it's kind of ruined the speedrunning for that game, because the fastest way to get a glitch speedrun now is to basically stand still for long periods of time while you run out timers and match. It gets into really weird territory where a character is holding an invisible item and you're trying to get the memory point to turn it to a warp zone, and there's a whole load of stuff. But it starts to really highlight how many things there are that are happening behind the scenes you take for granted, in terms of like shuffling memory and pointers to things. And it's just interesting to look into. Just, I would say, if you're fascinated by this stuff, just check out glitch speedruns, and you'll learn an awful lot about how games work. Physics glitches are one of the most common ones. Anytime somebody basically rockets themselves with infinite, speed, because they're building up speed because the grounding flag's not hit and they're maintaining their velocity, or why half the games you play in speedruns, people have to run backwards, because running backwards is almost always faster relative to how the motion is calculated from the vector of the movement of the analog stick. There's like a whole load of these things that are fascinating.
There was a
Yeah,
game where you could throw a horse into the ground and it would propel you absolute miles, and people were using it to teleport around the map. They would just then summon their horse back and then throw the horse into the ground. I can't remember what the game was. It was Skyrim or something like that. But you could literally just teleport around the map using your horse.
well,
After all-
Skyrim has it easier because you can just hold a plate to a corner and just ram yourself into the plate, and you'll fall from the floor.
I used to play a lot of FPS competitively, and the amount of times they would find a glitch and fall through the floor and then just sit down there and snipe everybody that was walking around above them was an absolute nightmare.
One game that actually got a really recent update to its speedrun tables was Final Fantasy X, because people finally figured out how you can seed the random number generator for the game. Because the PS2 version and the HD version of the game use different amount of bytes for the seed, and the HD version only has 1 byte for the seed. So there's only this many amount of runs, and only certain actions manipulate it. So they can turn some important encounters into a really fast interaction, which I found baffling, how much time is spent just analyzing how you should use a seed once you got it. What roles will you get, and what values do they translate to with every single encounter in the game, just so you can get the best items for your run.
Yeah, it seems time consuming and obsessive, but I guess like people like to do everything. So,
By the way, yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you.
Okay, I wanted to mention that in Terraria we actually have a bug that we embraced as a feature now, and it's called Hoik, where the game has slopes, and if you try to run into a tile, you should be stopped because it's a solid tile. You shouldn't be able to go into it. But the sloping code will say, well, he can actually move and move down just a little bit, and it would put you in a state where you're in the floor or in the wall. And some people would just start slamming slopes near doors that are locked and going straight through them. And some other people figured out that because it pushes you a bit, you could start making entire automatic walkways where once you start standing on this specific slope, it would start shooting you into another direction at maximum speed, because it was solving your position in such a way that it was moving you faster than the game would actually let you run. It's insane how much people make use of this and making giant automatic farms. I love it. Just want to say that.
And this stuff gets crazy too. Like it starts out with some of the smaller ones. Like Mario 64 is one of the best examples of just people have been dissecting that game for years. That you start out with the simple ones, like what you're describing. One of them is called Mips Clip. And Mips Clip is just there's a bunny character you grab, and when you grab a character, classic thing, if you use a collision, the collider will bounce you out. And so you can use the collision of you holding an item and when you release it or interact with it to bump you through a door that's normally locked. That's like the low level basic stuff. Then you start getting into this territory of alternate universes, and there's this entire concept of your camera being locked to the world that you're in. But because the game is basically the way it's tiled out, you can move, you can positionally be in a different position in an alternate universe relative to where you are, and then the camera hasn't moved, but if you know how to move about the space, you can do it and scale yourself out and then teleport back to wherever you want to be. So effectively people can lock themselves in one location, do something, and on screen you're just seeing a character like move around a bit. But what they're actually doing is navigating an invisible environment that you're not seeing, and then when they let go, it teleports them to exactly where they want to be in a different location because they know the exact like hops you have to make. And because there is code to course correct this stuff, like even if you don't mean to, there's stuff that'll like at a certain range, if your position's greater than this, move you over here. They will still round numbers and things. So they've kind of divided it up into different universes that scale differently, and so you have to know where you are in which universe in order to apply the calculations. It's crazy. It gets really, really crazy, and that's one game that people have really delved into. And there's so much of this stuff. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's actually really common for save point bugs where you'll reach a certain point in the level and you start ramming yourself near a wall that's really close to another save point, and then you save and quit. And when you load back in, you're actually past the point you weren't supposed to get to because the game decided, well, you're basically closer to this save point. Let me just take you there.
Yeah,
In
hit the trigger.
Fallout, yeah, in Fallout 4, I think there's one really big skip where you can go into a sewer near the one of the quests near the end of the game and just pop yourself into the dungeon and get that waypoint so you can keep teleporting back into it after.
That I used to be a little bit cheeky, and I played a lot of Mario Kart 64, and there is so much of that where if you're on one, you have to go to one side of a checkpoint, and then when you appear on the other side and you cross it, effectively the way it works is it's a number, and the number when you cross it one direction adds, and when you cross it the other way subtracts. So you can't just cheat by going back over it unless you can get back to the other side without crossing the line, in which case you're now behind it and now it'll recalculate you as having hit the checkpoint again. So there's a ton of tricks where you purposefully out of bounds yourself, and then the Lakitu will pick you up and put you back on the wrong side of the line so you don't get subtracted the counter, you can go back over. In one particular case, I think it's Yoshi's, no, it wasn't Yoshi Island, it was Diddy Kong's, one of them anyway. There was a particular one where there's a sloped hill behind you, and if you can manage to get behind that, you basically just have to bump into this wall and let the physics, it'll spin you out, and you come back and you just basically you're on the like track line. You drive forward, you bounce against something, it spins you behind the line. You cross the line, bounce again, spins you behind, and you can clear 3 laps in like 8 seconds, and then everyone else is off doing their thing, and you've already won the round. So I used to love. Another one thing with jumps. There's lots of areas where you can jump over large areas of the track, but then where you're positioned puts you incorrectly out of bounds, and so it resets you back. So yeah, I used to know a load of these just for fun. You'd let a friend get a lap and a half ahead of you, and then you'd quickly catch up by grabbing 2 laps just to annoy them.
Actually, on the topic of collisions going badly like this, in the latest Super Metroid, Metroid Dread, there's an exploit going around where if you charge a shot and then turn around and do it exactly precisely, your shot will go through a wall. Because what happens is when you start the shot, when you leave the button, it checks if you're near a wall, and if yes, just spawn a ruined shot. But there's a delay between the time you leave the button and the time the shot actually leaves the gun. So you can start a proper shot aiming at the area away from the wall, immediately turn into the wall, and the shot would go through it a bit, just enough so that you can destroy things that block you out from certain areas and make huge skips. Like you can skip the entire first stealth section of the game just by shooting a wall like that 3 times. And it happens again and again in some other areas.
Just from a little delay there.
Yeah. You made a valid action. You just change your direction after. Nothing wrong here, officer.
And sometimes attempts to fix these issues are things that actively cause them. Like one of the most interesting ones is you can get in scenarios in Metroidvania-esque games where you don't pick up the required thing. You need a thing in order to progress. You need a certain ability or power up or something. And so a very common tactic in games where you know that's a risk is you have a point with which you reset the loadout. If they get to this point, they should never have been able to get here without collecting these two things. Like there's no physical way to get to this platform without these two previous pickups. And all that does, though, is that really empowers speedrunners, because if they can get to that point without doing the things that we're supposed to get to the things, they'll just be resetted the full roster of abilities they need to have. And so it starts to get into this territory where you try to get outside the map to hit checkpoints that forward you along further than you need to be, so that by the time you load back in, you can literally exit the game and load back into the game. And when you load back in, it'll rerun the load code, which will then apply anything that's missing from inventory, which should have been there. And all of a sudden, you just get given all of the things.
Just a bunch of cheaters. So there were two other things I want to make sure to talk about real quick, and at least one that I want to get to before Dave has to run. And those were just two games that have one that came out and one that is not out yet but coming out. But before I talk about those, I did really quickly just want to remind everybody to hit the like button like Aaron did. If you like the show, want to come back and see some more, make sure that you hit like, hit subscribe. And I actually added, I forgot to mention this, channel membership. So you can now subscribe for memberships and get custom icons, and I'll add some emojis, and we'll start putting in some stuff there over the next couple of days, I think, as I do some more streams. But back on to the new topics and the streams. The first game I want to talk about was Age of Empires 4. So I was playing some this week. I was going to do some streaming a little bit more. I'll probably do some more throughout the week just because I've been having fun playing through it. I was always a big RTS fan with Age of Empires, Command and Conquer, and all that stuff. And I talked about it a little bit after playing the technical preview. But I've been playing the actual game since it came out, and just been really impressed with just the release in general. Usually when I play an RTS, I get it. It's buggy as crap, and it has all kinds of problems, and I just don't really have that much fun with it. But this one, I've been having a blast. The teams are different, the armies are varied, and the game seems to work pretty well. And the team modes are good too. So I was curious, have any of you guys tried it out, and do any of you guys want to play sometime?
I tried Game Parallels on my Mac, and I bought the game, and it won't load on Parallels.
Oh,
I know. But New World does, so I was able to play that for the first time. But now I'm thinking of getting a gaming PC, so we'll see. Oh yeah, without water. The water doesn't render on my Mac.
One of us.
As far as
I haven't got it, and I haven't played it yet.
Same here, though. I was eyeing it heavily. Yeah. I just have another game I've been wanting to play, which I just got a physical copy of the other day, and it's actually perfect for the Halloween season, so maybe I should bring it up. There's a game called Mari Skelter, which is a dungeon crawler RPG, very anime-based, and in there you have nightmares that you fight, and they all look really creepy, but what's more interesting is it's a turn-based game, and they exist on the map, and they walk around as you walk, and if you get into their area of vision, they will start chasing you. And you can still enter random encounters as you play that game, but if you enter that and you play your turn-based combat, they will actually keep chasing you from behind. They will enter the fights with the enemies that you're fighting against, and they will start skipping their turn forward, even hijacking your own, just so they can keep attacking you. And it's really crazy and stress-filled. So
what's the name of the game again?
Mari Skelter. They just released their third game, Mari Skelter Finale, on October 1st, and I just got my limited edition because of shipping delays. So it's right here near me, and it's really nice. Looks a lot full of characters and stuff.
I think I just dropped a link to it in chat. I have to check that out.
Yeah, that's the first one. Yep.
Nice. So
Yeah,
Did
go
you
ahead.
have something else? I wanted to jump on to the other game that you had showed me real quick before Dave goes, if possible.
Yeah, the hover one.
Yeah, so you were
Uh,
mentioning one of your friends
yeah.
who was making this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you want to bring it up, I'll link it down below. 1 second.
I've just popped it up on the screen right now. The Haru game. So I wanted to share this because
we don't
isn't
see it.
there-
We see the electric chair still.
You do?
Am I the only one seeing that, or
No, I'm
Jason?
seeing the Haru game.
Okay,
see the
Yeah,
Haru
it's showing
game.
wrong. Okay, it's only showing wrong for me then. So it's a game made by one of my friends, Shihan Ahmed, and he's a game design student at the Southern California University. And what they're doing there is they're studying game development, and they started a group project where they could each pitch a project. The most popular projects get teams, and they get to lead the project they pitched. So they have to start picking who works on what, and the students volunteer to join specific teams, and they're all working together and they're trying really different stuff. And it's made in Unity. It's really nice. You can see a lot of his progress as he tries different systems and whatnot. I think it was using URP, which is nice to know things are modern these days. I think the project is named Spookulele, so perfect for Halloween. And it's the capstone of his major, I think.
It looks really impressive for a student project. That's one of the reasons I wanted to share it, because I saw the trailer and the Steam project, and they're putting up their actual student project on Steam, and it looks like it looks like an actual indie game, right? It doesn't look like a student project. So I thought it was really, really cool
Yeah,
and worth
agreed.
sharing.
Yeah, and it's making good usage of a lot of like more advanced Unity features you don't hear about. For example, there's one of the screenshots on the Steam, the last one, has a lot of these chime bells in the scene, and that one is actually using dynamic instanced drawing with code instead of just spawning a bunch of game objects for optimizations, because it's heavy. And they want to make sure it runs on like really low end platforms. I think one of the things they wanted to target is Switch potentially. So
Huh.
if you're going to a university, this is the kind of experience you might be getting, which is inspiring, I think.
Yeah, and like I said, I wanted to show this while Dave was here, just because I know Dave's seen a lot of university projects, especially out of Southern California. Interact with a good number of students there, a lot of their different things, and I thought you might be interested in this one, or maybe I'm going to be like, "Hey, yeah, check this out, Dave," and you're like, "Oh yeah, I worked with them," and
No.
half the time
I
I
haven't seen this one.
Dave, he knows the person, and he's like, "Yeah, we have a business together actually, and known him for 10 years."
No, I haven't seen this one. It is. If you had showed me this, I wouldn't have said it was a student product, because it is. It's that level above it. Sometimes you meet students at these places that just produce amazing stuff straight off the bat, and this is good looking. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I've been talking with him a lot as he develops it, and one really interesting topic came up. They have puddles in the game, and they paint them with Polybrush. Now, if you don't know Polybrush, it's a package for Unity where you have a paintbrush and you can paint the vertex colors of terrains. So you can do a lot of very interesting things for shaders, where you can sample those vertex colors and do whatever you want. One popular usage of this technique is if you want a big surface that's flat to have different surface features, you can paint things into the vertex colors and then make them show up different in the shader. So games will have flat floors, but then puddles that gradually fill in depending on the vertex color. Now, this is all nice, but it's hard to get that information back out, usually, if you don't know the proper techniques. And one reason you might want to get this information out is you play footstep sounds, and if you step in a puddle, you'd want to have a splash sound. Do any of you know an easy strategy to get that? Because I had the right one immediately, but I found it really interesting to see if this is common knowledge.
From polybrush, no. From terrain, I've done it a bunch of times, but not from.
If you just want to know if an area is in a puddle, a collider even. No? Okay. So here's the fun one. When you raycast, did you know that you actually get barycentric coordinates and the triangle index of the surface that you hit? So you can actually get that, and that means you can actually sample the exact free vertex colors and the exact ratios, so you can know the exact amount of puddliness that the floor has, so you
That's
can
clever.
play the splash zone. Yeah, and it's like it's one of those things in Unity that really impressed me because it's right there. It's super easy to use. It's a simple raycast. You do that with all the things ever, but it's almost never used.
Well, not a lot of
Raycast
people
hits.
use the vertex colors when they're starting out and all the rest of it in that stuff.
Yeah, but
That's
I'm
cool.
just saying raycast hits have a lot of properties
Extras.
that are
Yeah.
It's one of those really nice out of the box features that you didn't expect to ever see.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was there. I'm gonna have to play around with that.
Yeah.
It seems
Me
like
too.
an interesting thing to make a video out of too. Be a fun one. Speaking of, I'm gonna do a video soon on singletons. I think with Salim, Jason, just for you.
Every week.
About singletons, why they're good, why they're bad, and dive kind of deep into them. I think Salim had a really good idea for a format for explaining them, so I thought it would be fun. All right, I wanted to say bye to Dave because he's got to head out, and thanks for coming on us. And I assume we'll see you again real soon.
Yep.
Happy
It's good to chat to
Halloween
you.
and have fun. Say hi to the wife and enjoy all the kids coming by. Try not to terrify them too much.
Yeah,
Happy
we'll do.
Halloween.
And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
All right, see you
Good
soon.
luck.
Have a fantastic day.
See ya.
All right. So, I guess I didn't have a whole lot of other topics I wanted to talk about. It is Halloween, so I don't want to keep everybody for too long. I still need to get one of those hoodies, by the way, Andrew. I've got to get that Unity hoodie. I have a hoodie addiction, and it's like the only one that I see that I just need to get.
And this
That
is
reminds me,
vintage
I still
now.
I still need to hit up Jason for my my parts for the course stuff as well. I need to get my hands on some Jason Weimann merch as well.
Oh yes, let me hook you up. Yeah, I know. The vintage hoodie, it's like an antique now. I'm gonna have to
Yep.
go to the thrift stores and find one.
Yep.
Shit.
See, I don't have
I'm-
anything cool. The best I have is I have some Oculus like pencils, and they have other stupid craft like post-it notes with an Oculus logo on it and other nonsense that they gave me at some events. Nothing fun.
Can I focus him? No, I can't get him.
Is that the
Focus.
Unity?
Unity
Lego?
Lego dude?
You probably
The
want to put a
minifigure
hand
guy?
behind it and then make it closer to the camera. So
That's a good idea. Whoosh.
There we
You can
go.
see him. He's got a little controller there. He's got a keyboard, a shirt, and he's got a hold on. Let's pop this off. It's like the most exciting thing I've had all week. He's also got a girl head. Pretty exciting stuff. So, but yeah, I really like these things. I like the Unity stuff too a lot. The hoodies and shit. And now I'll have to hook you up, Jason. We're gonna talk after this call. I got lots of different things to send you. But I wanted to see, is there anything else that you guys really wanted to just discuss or talk about, or topics that you thought would be something we should hit this week? We've already talked about kind of the things I thought were important, or Halloween stuff.
Well, I guess I just have a general rant
ahead.
and a question to the audience. Is sort of so one of the client projects I'm working on is Bluetooth plus VR, and I have learned in the last 2 weeks more than I ever needed to know about Bluetooth plus VR, and I hate it. I hate all of it. It's wasted a lot of my time. And so I just have a general question, and there's a lot of nuance to this, so I want to be really expressly clear. Has anybody ever connected a Bluetooth heart rate monitor to a VR headset via Bluetooth? And to be really clear here, I am not saying connected it via some other tool like an Arduino, and I'm not saying connected any Bluetooth device. I am saying a specifically Bluetooth using the profile standard for heart rate, which is HRP, I think, specifically connected to a headset, because I've been going down this rabbit hole where I've been tasked with connecting a Bluetooth sensor to a VR headset, and I'm beginning to think it's impossible. Now, that's, again, we all know that's not to say you can't actually connect a Bluetooth device, because I can connect to my phone, I can do all sorts of other stuff, but specifically trying to connect a heart rate sensor to the VR headset, I don't think most of them support the protocols. And second from that, a lot of them will connect but then won't transmit correctly. So there's a lot of ways around this. Like, you can have a third-party app on your phone that captures data and transmits it through a web API. You can connect a USB-based device that will then do the work for you. Long story short, I'm amazed to find out that I can connect a heart rate monitor thing on my phone, works fine. On a Unity app, I write, read the number, see a heart rate. But if I try to use the exact same code, but build it for Pico or Oculus or whatever, it doesn't show up. The heart rate doesn't connect. And so I'm pretty confident it's down to supported profiles with Bluetooth, but it's just infuriating me. Just a classic example of what it's like to be a developer. So if anybody has an example of specifically the sensor connecting to the headset directly, no third-party devices, then let me know, because I've given up trying to find the answer.
And if they do know, so say maybe they're not with us live, they come watch later. How should they contact you, or if they got an idea or some insight into this?
Well, if someone either joins the Discord or even just put a comment here, I'll put a bounty up for whatever, $100. There you go. If someone can do it directly, connect a sensor. Oh, and here's the other thing too. It has to be a wrist-based sensor, just to throw another curveball, because
Okay.
some of them are. There's a very common one for chest-based sensors. Now, again, it's fundamentally the same technology, but there seems to be different standards applied for different ones. Just leave a comment on the video or join Discord or something. Just find a way to get in touch with me. I'll make it worth your while.
You heard it. He's got a bounty there. We're gonna have to put that in the title. Just put it in the comments and we get in contact with Jason. Even the answer. I've actually done that quite a few times. You just like go out and searching and just pay for the answer to something. Save me a bunch of time and energy. And after you look for the solution for a week or two and start struggling, about to give up, it starts to become worthwhile.
There's not even the fun. There's not even the fun of exploring the source code of someone else's application that's decompiled just so you can find the one thing that's going wrong, because you're working with protocols and hardware. So
I will say that's the one thing I do strongly miss. I was having a rant with a friend of mine about this. One thing I miss about enterprise software is usually the domain is well known. You're probably using the mean stack or Angular or something, and the way you do it is the same the way you always do it for everything. You might have individual problems and certain hardware might have certain issues, but usually the answer is there. It just might be somewhere buried. Or if it's if you're working on a legacy piece of software, it's there. It's just 4 years ago somewhere with no documentation, buried in line 5,000. But it's there. The answer is there somewhere. Unlike with a lot of stuff that I have to do in Unity, which is, can you make X work with Y? And it's like, cool, let's pull down 5 different SDKs, try out 15 different approaches, all of this stuff, and you're trying to find the answer, and you've got no indication of if it's even possible. And oftentimes it's on a stringent deadline. So I do kind of miss the level of relaxed freedom of find this bug. It's one line of code somewhere in this giant project, and there was a lot of. It was a lot more dull, but it was a lot less stress inducing. So there's always the trade-off.
Well, it's because you get those wins with those, right? Like when you get those problems, you're constantly finding solutions. When you get stuck without a solution for too long, it gets to be overwhelming and irritating and not fun. Right? Like it's what ruins development when you get stuck for too long without an answer.
it's not even that. It's about black boxes as well. With Unity, you don't get access to the source code, and there are many things that can go wrong, and it's beyond your domain. And sometimes you don't even get an error that tells you why it went wrong in that specific spot. And when that happens, it's infuriating, because every other big project, or at least the public packages, you can see the source code and know, oh, this is why it went wrong. And,
I've had issues where like a
go
manifest
around
files
it.
and stuff. Just so many different
Yeah.
issues where random stuff just goes wrong, or different SDKs don't work, and it's also like it's kind of infuriating to a lot of this stuff has more nuance to the problem than you think it does. For example, I've used Bluetooth stuff before. I've used Bluetooth sensors before. I've connected Arduinos to the device before. I've skirted this problem so many times, but it never occurred to me to know the differences about some of these nuances because it never broke before. But now I've seen devices that said Bluetooth and ANT plus. Now I always thought ANT plus was just another like sub protocol of Bluetooth. No, ANT plus is a different thing. Some sensors support both, but they're not actually. ANT plus is not Bluetooth. That's one of those like weird. So you kind of until you have a problem with it, you often don't need to learn the details, and so you make assumptions. And so when you're asked as a developer, how long will it take to connect this device to this device? You're like, well, it's an SDK. I connected to my phone. I succeeded in doing that in a day. Getting connected to the headset, call it another day or two because I've proven it works here. It's just a different device. And then 2 weeks later, everybody's like panicked, pulling their hair out, and you're like, okay, let me explain the 15 reasons why this isn't as straightforward as I originally thought it was. I went with the information I had when I gave you that estimate. The estimate changed. Nobody's to blame. It's just this is what happens sometimes, and it can be a very awkward scenario.
Yeah, give me flashbacks to all my mobile development, switching devices, making things work for Android and iOS, and VR is a tough one, but mobile in general is just a pain in the ass.
Oh, and there's a fun side note on this too. So here's the thing: whenever you have a problem like this, smartest thing to do is do some research. And this is to show you how this can blind you. I found another platform which promised to have heart rate on a headset. I'm, cool, let's try their thing. I tried it, and it did show a heart rate. I'm like, oh, their stuff seems to work. What I find out later is they're doing what they're calling an estimated heart rate, which means it's got nothing to do with the sensor of what you're doing. It is down to the head movement of the gyroscope of the VR headset. And you're like, okay, cool. So that's not really doing what it says it's doing on the face of it. Then another one said, we have heart rate. I said, cool, let's try that one. They don't really do it either. What they do is they read from a web API, which is connected via an app on the Apple Watch, which sends the data to the servers and then pulls it down and shows on the headset. So there's all of these like alternate red flags, which are like, these guys did no, didn't. These guys, oh no, not that either. No, these guys, and then the other one is like, oh, these guys have it working. Oh no, they're using a third-party Arduino board plugged in via USB onto it. Every one of them has a caveated reason why it's not actually the thing we want, but it's like tangentially close. So yeah, it's so many different problems.
I wonder what kind of
this-
hack you'll come up with to solve this.
I'll pack my bags and go live in the woods because I'm getting fed up of it. Is what's going to happen.
Please don't. It actually reminded me of an issue I had with Terraria regarding peripheral RGB support. Did you guys ever mess with RGB for your games or applications? No? So if you don't know, there are multiple distributors of RGB peripherals. By peripherals, I mean mouse, keyboard, the Razer, what's it called?
The Razer Chroma stuff.
The Razer Chroma.
Razer, Lifex, Philips, they all have their own different suites of stuff as well with their own SDKs.
Yeah, no, I meant they have specifically a mouse pad that has RGB rims so that you can give colors to. So most of these have their own API that you can consume and say, okay, well, this spot, draw this color. And each of them uses different standards. So you say, okay, I'll interface it. I have this thing that says I want the Q key to have this color, W have that color, E, etc., etc. And then for each of them, I'll just use the unique way they work. When we started this in Terraria, we had it for 3 different distributors. We had Razer, Corsair, and I think Logitech. That all went fine, and they were all DLLs that you just interact with and immediately send the commands to. And the entire API was done in immediate mode. I mean, we request it, it immediately goes through the interface and immediately goes and sends the command. But later, we wanted to add SteelSeries. And SteelSeries doesn't work that way. The way SteelSeries work is that you connect to the application they have running through a NetSocket. And you send packets that say, this is what I want to have happening. And you have to construct them in an exact way and send them over. And while we did that, and it kind of worked, something started going wonky. After some time that we kept sending it messages, it would freeze. And we'd have to actually close the game and wait until it resets, which is an entire 15 seconds, and then try again and figure out what's going wrong. Now, can you guess from what I told you so far what's going wrong?
Well, my little experience with similar stuff has been the packets tend to be handshakes, and if you don't get the right handshake correct packet order, then sometimes it'll freeze and wait for a response and then stop working. Possibly.
Close, but not. You do have to send some heart rate if you're not sending anything over time. But what actually went wrong there is we sent too many because the game was updating every frame and we wanted really smooth RGB. So what happened is we'd send the amount of keys times all 40, 60 frames that the RGB updater ran, and it would be a ton of packets, and it would slow the thing to a crawl. Now, we didn't initially even know this is a problem, but then I went and checked my process Explorer for CPU usage, and I found 30% of my CPU was just handling these packets. So the throttling began. And then it worked perfectly fine for the keyboard, but the mouse pad they had kept freezing on me, and I didn't understand what's going on. So I actually had to start round robining the updates for every single light on it. And it was a hell to figure out because it's not documented anywhere.
Wow. Yeah, that seems like a pain. I remember actually, now that you talk about it, I remember playing with this a couple times and almost adding RGB integrations for Logitech's keyboards. It just never ended up actually going out into production. So I almost did it with Vanguard, and then I played a little bit with it on EQ2 as well. Ended up just never actually pushing it out, but I was using them internally for myself, kind of playing with it and experimenting. But there was no actual demand, so it was like me and 3 other guys on the forums that thought it was cool. I never
That does remind me, the Razer one drove me insane as a consumer, not as a developer, because so Razer have this thing they call Chroma, and Razer Chroma is their brand of products which support the lighting fanciness. So there's Razer products, then Razer Chroma, which might be the exact same product, but now it also supports connecting to their service, which changes colors of all the stuff. So I had, at one stage, I used the one-handed keyboards, the keypad specifically for gaming, because they have mechanical switches, and I use Topper switches for programming, and they're not as good for the whole thing. But basically, I use the Razer keypad for gaming whenever I do first-person shooters. And I, at one stage, picked up a Orb Weaver Chroma, the specifically labeled version that supports their lighting system. And I was playing Overwatch, which has a really cool set of stuff where the actual buttons will light up when your ultimate abilities are ready in various different things. And it's kind of like a cool addition. And it wasn't working. And I was really curious. And I was like, why is this not working? And I did back and forth, and I checked stuff, checked the forums. There, Orb Weaver Chroma doesn't support Chroma. their named branded version that's got the fucking product name in the title of the product in their forums. It's like, oh yeah, sorry, that doesn't support that. It's like, it's of all of the products, it's late. And I was like, surely this is a joke. And I did so much research into it, and I just found out, yeah, they apparently, that one product, despite being in the lineup, they're using Chroma at a product level to say it is RGB, but does the fact that it's RPG doesn't promise that it supports their own SDK of the Chroma support that's supposed to be integration with games. And so that product would not use the lighting effect. It would change color and you could do all of that, but it wouldn't do the like live highlight the buttons correctly to match the game, unlike say the Black Widow brand of keyboards, which would, because they did have that support.
I wonder if that's just a software thing where it's just not supported in the software. Because I know, like with that Razer Chroma software, you can see all of the devices in there and assign them. I wonder if it's just that there's so few of them and so little demand they never did the integration, or if there's actually some hardware reason for it.
I assumed it was just software, but it was just mind-boggling to me that they have this particular SKU of products which are designed for this, and this one doesn't support it. It's like,
yeah, my guess is it's just lack of demand, and they never got around to it. Although that still seems bad.
I just wanted to say that to SteelSeries credit, while I was working on the entire thing with them, there was a dedicated person with me, and we had it set up so we don't even have to email. I just had him on Discord, and I would send him all the questions about, hey, is this actually rejecting my messages or anything? And he gave me a lot of useful info. And even better, because Terraria, the way we had our first free distributions, we were actually sending the colors we want per key on the fly. And SteelSeries doesn't have it that way. It has a lot of pre-configured. You just want this to do gradients over time, so just send the gradient once and never again, and it will just do it for you. But we couldn't use that because we were updating at real time every single key. So they actually wrote a new kind of key type for us to pass in manually, and that was fantastic, and I really loved working with them. It was just a lot of initial figuring out how do we adapt our existing system to have both deferred and throttled and round robin the message sending, and then figuring out proper settings so it all looks smooth. But it's really nice. Also, you can
That's
get a lot of
good support.
yeah. Also, just on RGB in general, you should try playing with it because it's a lot of fun. But more importantly, you get a lot of benefits that you don't expect out of it. So one thing that I really love is in Terraria, we light up the keys that you can press. So if you have if the game starts accepting input, we have the WASD keys light up white, and the health key if you got a potion, and the hook key if you got a grappling hook, etc., etc. And they don't light up until you have them, which is a nice touch. But we do one step farther. Every biome in the game lights up the keyboard entirely differently. So, say you're in a forest, we have green colors and brown colors for the dirt and the leaves, etc. And if you go underground, we have brown and gray. If you go to the stars space, it's actually going black, and then we have pulsing stars going on the keyboard, which is cute. But more importantly, when gameplay related things happen, such as you're drowning, we turn the entire keyboard blue to let you know to get out of there. And if you're low health, all the keys dim down completely black except the heal button, which starts throbbing red. Hey, click me, don't die.
That's
And
very cool.
yeah, there's a lot of checks in the game code that you have to adjust so that you know when it's a good time to do that. But if you do that, you get a lot of value out of it, and it feels really nice. It's a game of its own, really.
I'm probably the wrong candidate though, because aside from those blue lights back there, I don't do RGB anything. My computer has no RGB. No, sorry, it does have one strip there, but it's literally just so I can see in it. It's plain white and it's low. It's like half the brightness. And then I have my keyboard has no RGB. My mouse has no RGB. Nothing else except the Go XLR. But honestly, I leave it at plain colors as well. It's simple. Just it lights up so I can see it, and I don't. I'm not an RGB person.
Poor guy. It's okay.
How do
I'll
you
get you
do-
some more RGBs, any hoodies and lights. So when you set up that integration, I was just curious. So you set up is there just like a layer that you have in Terraria that everything ties into to just do this, and then I assume it's completely agnostic in the rest of your game code? Can you kind of explain that to people? They know like if they want to build something like this, just a general overview of how you put it together.
Sure. So at the base level, what you need to do is know what you want to tell the hardware to have. So if it's half of the keyboard needs to be green and half needs to be brown, you make a setup where you have keyboard portions and left half brown, right half green, etc. Or if you want specific keys, you say, I need to have a key named W this way. Just on an interface level, you don't even know which hardware you're working with yet. Then you have a list of these are hardwares that are plugged, send these to all of them. And then each of them solves the requirements as it needs to. So if it's a DLL that's just calling the things immediately, it will just say, well, in this one, I have to pass in an ID int for the key and the color that I want in 1 byte each color, for example. And something else would say, well, I need to actually send packets, so put them in a queue, and every update, check if I have anything in the queue and dispatch it, or wait until it's big enough and then dispatch it, etc., etc. But it's really a general, I have a list of stuff that accept things. I make stuff, pass them to the things. I make the things, pass them to the stuff, and then just let it happen. You probably do that with a lot of regular interfaces too.
Yeah, so you just kind of approach it with the, I guess, to clarify for everybody, you approach it from the side of the things that you need to do first and the interfaces of how you want to interact with it, and then hook it up to those hardware. So I think one of the things people will do wrong a lot of the time is get the hardware SDK and then start to code their whole system around that, around whatever the first one that they use is. And then they have to, in the second one, to work around that first one's SDK and the way that that was set up. So important to, I guess, just get that defined and then make those interfaces work. It's definitely an interesting thing. Everybody should try it out.
When we were code reviewing that racing car project the other week, we actually had a case where we said we had a leaky implementation of the scoreboard, I think, which had callbacks. So just be mindful of that. If you start seeing things that are like not describing your intent and instead describing an implementation, stop and refactor that. You should be calling the intent of what you want, and the implementation should just do that, but not call the implementation.
Yeah, and if you want like a classic example of this, there's something called the adapter pattern. And if you want a real life example of the adapter pattern, there is plug adapters. If you go to different countries, you shouldn't have to have 50 plugs coming off of one device to hypothetically cover every scenario. You instead have a contract at the wall, a contract at the device, and then something in the middle that connects the two together or adapts one shape to match another shape and performs anything that needs to be done in the middle. In the case of what you're doing here, you have a one shape, which is requests to do certain things with lights. And then on the other end, you've got a, when I receive a request, do something with it with a different shape depending on the API of the provider. And so you would create an adapter that would adapt each of those to match, and then you would provide those. And that way that you can plug something into a universal shaped system, and every new one gets added can do different things. And that's really beneficial down the line, because you can get devices that aren't even created yet that can be adapted to support the contract that you've already made. And that's how kind of smart TV remotes and stuff works. You can have a smart remote that controls a television, but if someone brings out some new infrared device, you are still able to fire infrared commands to that device without having to rebuild the controller.
Yeah, and you should also go back, I think, 2 weeks ago to Jason's example with toasters and plugs. I think it was 2 weeks ago, right?
I think so.
Who
Yeah.
knows? I reuse a lot of the same examples, so it could have been any of the last few weeks.
So there was one question I want to hit before we start wrapping things up, which was about Unity 2021.2, which you or I actually wanted to hit too, which is great because I don't have a whole lot of thoughts, but I was really curious what your guys' thoughts are with 2021.2. Is there anything big and exciting or interesting in that version that's coming out and that you think people should care about and know about, or what are your general thoughts on it? I guess we'll let you or I jump in first.
So there's two big things that are always fun to have. 2021.2 added C#9. So you get all the features like pattern matching enhancements and function pointers, etc., etc. So always love having that. I think there was one of the better improvements in C#9 for getting numerator in for each loops, which I'm forgetting about what it was right now. Sorry for blacking out.
No.
But cool stuff. They have a whole list of it in the Unity patch notes area. But the second big thing, which is arguably more important for most Unity developers, is they added support for the scriptable tools for tiles and the UI of the scene view. So you can now make your own tools in there easily. And they have a whole section for it. in the changelog. Did
Yeah,
you guys
well,
get to see any of that?
Is that the
I
UI
haven't really dug
toolkit?
into it, but now that I'm taking a look
No.
at it, I really want to.
I think they call it scriptable tools. Also, just let me send this
I'm
over.
gonna pull it up here on the screen so you guys can, or everybody watching along can kind of see what you're about there. So, oh, why is it showing the wrong game? It's showing the game. Switch it. There we go. So you're talking about this part right here, where you're actually adding in parts to the scene view and editors to the scene view, right?
I can't see your.
Oh, it's not show. Oh, that's right. You're not.
Yeah,
getting
it's
around.
just working for me. I'm sorry. So I have a paste bin here where I put all the notes that actually interested me out of their changelog. We can just go through it because all of them probably deserve some place.
Yeah, let's pull it up. I've got it here, but it's a little tiny to read. There's a lot of
Sorry
stuff
about
in
that.
here. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of these are like really small improvements, but some of them are deceptively major. For example, in physics, you can now manipulate articulation bodies way better. Do you know what an articulation body is in Unity?
No.
So first off, that's one of the other things that you can get in a raycast. But more importantly, it describes the joint or the way something moves in the simulation. So it has the mass. Is it immovable? Does it use gravity? Or if it has computation positions, you can manipulate them. And this Unity update lets you manipulate it before the physics simulation solves it. So you can now do a lot of crazy things like making something roll just the right way where you couldn't before. It might be a bit advanced. Sorry,
Yeah, I was
I'm
trying
actually.
to figure out like what the use cases are. I assume you've got to have some somewhat complex physics needs that are beyond the normal, right?
Yeah, okay, so I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here. Jason, I hope you bake me up on this one. I have been rewriting Unity's update loop in my DMC manipulation project because I wanted to have perfect collisions for swords. Did you ever have the problem with it? No,
I
I
have
guess
not.
not.
I don't know about you,
Okay.
Story, but I mean, I've definitely done my own update loops in the past, but it was all just around performance. Had nothing to do with exact timing and physics. What about
Yeah.
Story? Have you done that?
No, I literally, the only time I've ever written my own update loops is when I want to have control over stepping through. Like if I've done stuff where I want to simulate things slowly and demonstrate it. I've never bothered with I'll be honest, when it comes to the physics and the collision stuff, I very much fake it. I'm one of those, I honestly, just mostly because as a player, I don't like physics systems in games. I much prefer coded animations because I think the wonky stuff, it too often or not, again, maybe it's all those videos I've watched about speedruns, but the amount of times you can rocket yourself into space and break games, I much prefer an animation. It may break sometimes, it may not be as smooth, but an animation is consistent and repeatable. And so oftentimes I favor those instead. So I haven't done much with anything more complex than like building a car with proper wheels. Like it's the most I've ever done in terms of complicated physics.
Hey, even then you deal with the wheel collider.
Oh, yeah, that
Or
horrible wheel
not.
collider, or yeah, no,
Yeah.
or doing stuff where there's a great examples of doing a helicopter where you're applying different forces correctly to fly it and stuff. But when it gets to like characters, I have done nothing outside of ragdolls when it comes to character plus physics. That's voodoo magic as far as I'm concerned. That's not my area. I leave that to other people.
So here's a fun little thing. So there is a subset of things that are really difficult to do in games because the simulations for them are very complex. Two such examples are cloth physics, which have to be right as things move and not stretch too far, etc., etc. The other thing that a lot of people gloss over is animations with correct physical interactions, which is very difficult to articulate what's wrong until you actually get to it, but I'll try my best. You have a hand. The hand has a sword. The sword is a long stick. As you animate, the sword needs to be able to cut through things. Now, the limb of the hand moves, and rotates, and the limb of the sword moves and rotates. So the sword moves and rotates along with it. When you think about moving an animation forward, how do you imagine it actually working? Because some engine would have you believe that every single bit is rotated, casting all of its collisions, then the other bit rotates and does all of its collisions, and then the last one. But that wouldn't be exactly right, because all of them have to move in tandem just perfectly to do the thing. So
Yeah,
it
well,
starts
most
getting...
games solve that by just having a big giant box collider that hits the first thing, that does subdivisions, and you've now got like 2 or 3 smaller colliders that would subdivision those, and then you end up at best, once you've got the correct subsection with the correct target object, you might do like a dot product or something to get yourself an angle, and now you've got like roughly enough information to do a cut.
Yeah, and most games will actually make those colliders really big. For example, if you don't know, Dark Souls will have colliders as big as half the character for the sword, the tiny sword that you're swinging, just so they make sure that they hit the thing if the sword moves fast. Because this problem gets worse the faster your animation moves, because most engines, instead of doing the entire complicated thing of moving each limb and making them lerp and doing all the exact computations of this exact collider has to rotate and move and intersect with everything that's moving that way, they'll just sample the animation again, completely ignore everything, and then try to cast again the physics. And what would happen is, if you have a sword swinging very fast, one frame it could be to this area, and the other frame it could be already to that area. Everything in between the diagonal angle will never get hit, which is why we end up with colliders that are half the character's size, because we want
And
to hit that even in
and
those
the
two
other
frames.
solution to that is the classic: you do the 2 collisions, and then if they don't hit, you can do a rake cast between the 2 points, or a line cast rather, and then find out anything that you've glossed over during that. But now you're getting into messier like sub collisions of stuff, and it's not
And you
fun.
have to, yeah, and you still have to write a lot of code that does those in betweens, and you don't always have access to methods that do it properly. So one example that I hit with Unity is, you might have a capsule collider, which sounds nice. I just want to address something. Cien Peye in the comments mentioned, can you use continuous collisions for it? No. Continuous collisions are for between frame to frame solving the physics, but they don't address animations. At best in Unity, you can toggle the box that's called animate physics. But what that does is it makes the animator only sample during physics, which is not what you want, because if the animation is very fast, now you restricted it, so every step is exactly whatever your fixed step size is, and it might actually be worse, because now instead of every frame it animates every fixed frame, so it misses some. The problem is way deeper than that. And even if you want to do what Jason said, where you remember the last position and you make a ray cast or an object cast, capsule cast, whatever, that still won't get everything for you, because this assumes linear movement between the last frame and this frame. And if your sword, I just want to address this, if your sword was here to here, and then the next frame it's already here to here, you will cast directly in this line, not the rotation that it had left or to the right. And it's a rabbit hole. And this is why I ended up with writing my own character update system, which, instead of letting the animator update super fast and doing all these things wrong, it will call Unity's animator evaluation manually with smaller time steps, log all of these. Then after this, in the update, I'll start casting the entire way properly. And even with casting, and I can't get over this, Unity doesn't actually have any method to make you cast with rotation over time. You can only sweep forward in a straight line. It drives me mental. So that was hell. And I wrote an entire system that let me say, these are important animations, never skip the animator here, make sure you hit every keyframe and send all of these to the proper components in a proper way so that they don't miss anything. I even use assets like X Weapon Trail. Did any of you ever use it? I had to go into its code and update it so I can manually call its update function so that I can pass the points on the trail. All just so I can have this. Jason, if you can share it for fun. So this is in exact time.
You might want to zoom out a bit there, Jason.
Yeah, it was a little zoomed.
So this is in a normal frame rate. I just made this up. The character have 5 attacks per second, and all of the trails still animate with the exact curvature that they need, and all the collisions are being hit at the exact same point they should be. And the weapon is the exact shape of its hit. The weapon you see is the weapon that's colliding. I don't have half a character size worth of collision. So now, if I want someone to hold a sword to parry you, you actually have to hit their sword to get parried, and it's a lot nicer conceptually. I still didn't get to do much more with that.
But now that you've put all of that work in, you're going to have to do some mesh slicing just so it really gets the accurate slices to see what it does. Like, it'd be a waste if you went to all this effort. I know, as I'm saying, because I know you put all the work in, so all that's left is to tie the resulting lines and use it in the mesh slicer. There's like loads of mesh slicer assets on the asset store. You should just pick one of them and just feed your collection of vectors into it and just like actually slice things up. And
it's not even collection of vectors. I actually had a breakpoint of the exact moment that the sword hits something, and it's the exact curvature, the exact point, and the exact forward of the weapon is being calculated perfectly, so I can just cut straight through it if I want to. I'm
one
super
of the slicing ones on that pack that we were looking at earlier too. That tool bundle has a slicing pack in there already.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I'm just super excited for this because this was like a complete rabbit hole I've been in for 2 weeks now, Jason? I think.
It looks great. Just looking at the lines.
You sounded like you were going to give up one stage last week.
Yeah, at one... Let me tell you, I basically rewrote Unity's timeline for this. One thing about Unity's timeline is it can guarantee that you call certain events at certain times, and I wanted to have that with my character animations so that when I author them, I can say 10% into this animation, call this event, and guarantee that it gets called and you don't skip over it, and I need to know the exact rotation in this exact frame so that I can shoot the sword just right. Now, it might not seem significant to you, and you might say, well, just fake the code and call it whenever, but I really care about having things exact delta time proper, regardless of the character's attack speed. Because I hate when games don't add attack speed as a stat. I love when games give you a haste, and I understand why a lot of action games don't give you that. Ergo, the entire conversation just now. This is why your games don't give you attack speed scaling.
Oh yeah. I hate working on MMOs when people want to have the animation scale with the attacks. You're like, no. Like they do too much shit. Like it gets to be a giant pain. But with this, I think it makes a lot of sense. You're doing like a really tight game, and I really want to see what it looks like when you have another character in there and they start actually sword fighting now. Start making them hit back and have the swords parry back and knock back. I'm just waiting to see. What do you have a full game idea for this? By the way, I mean you've been experimenting with it.
So I what?
I would say, is it something you can even talk about, or is this top secret?
Yeah, no, it's not top secret. It's something I do for fun. But
well, you should show some of the other gifts for context. Like you've got the parkour stuff you've got, which might give more context to the kind of thing that you're aiming for.
That's going to take me a bit of time to find.
There's also a lot of trail stuff that you were doing that looks particularly cool with getting the slices to look right.
Yeah, I'll try to look it up as we talk. But as far as the idea goes, it's just trying to do the best combat possible from all the games that I like. And as far as that goes, there's a lot of nuances in Devil May Cry where you can juggle enemies. Have you ever seen that happening in games where an enemy gets knocked up in the air and you don't let them down? And In Devil May Cry 5, they even added directional character hit animations. So if you hit an enemy from the back, they'll get knocked forward. If you hit them from the front, they get knocked with a backwards animation. And if you knock them up, they'll like have their belly show up and then start falling down, etc., etc. And I like all these things, but I like it even more where the character can spawn projectiles and each projectile know exactly what angle it hits the enemy, so the enemy turns the exact proper way for it. And if a sword cuts you from the right or from the left, I want to be able to know that, which is how this entire mess started, because I needed to know the exact sword rotation and the moment of hitting to be right. Because if you were faking it and you're just putting an overlap collider, the cut is always going to happen in a certain specific angle, which won't always look right. So I wanted that to be always to the exact degree proper. Sorry. Other than that, it's just about adding all the most complicated special abilities like lightning that stuns the character in the air and then explodes a bit after, so it puts them a bit up, and then you can make a fire, so it creates an explosion, etc., etc. Games I play include Kingdom Hearts, Devil May Cry, Honkai Impact, Genshin Impact, and they all have a lot of elements that you could incorporate into making really awesome combat, because each of them has really awesome combat. Actually, about that note, did you hear about the recent fiasco with Honkai Impact 3 on Steam?
No. What happened?
So they released the game on Steam recently, and the game already existed for 4 years, 2 of which they had a PC native client, because it's a Unity game. And initially it was mobile only. And then they made a native client with their own launcher that you can play. They launched it on Steam, but the game has unique accounts for Steam, and you can't play with the accounts that you played for 4 years on that. So that's bad enough, but the game came with anti-cheat that would blue screen crash everybody who tried to play on day one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that only happens on the Steam version, not the native PC client they have.
Right, not the one that was actually getting tested by QA, the internal build. That is
supposedly.
That's rough.
Yeah. Somebody's asking about how to obtain the collision angles. So this is a whole fiasco in itself, but I just want to go through it because it's really fun too. When you say, I want a hit of something, there's a lot of questions of what exactly is hitting. Because if it's a bullet that's hitting a character, it's going to say, well, the bullet's forward is the attack angle, right? But if it's a sword, it should be the sword's cuts forward, the velocity of the object, because a sword can stab you, which means the top of it. It can slice you, which means the big angle of it, where it's going. And it's not always clear, because in animation you don't have the concept of velocity. So you could say it's always the weapons forward, and then it could kind of get you the angle that you need. But some attacks might even say, well, I want world up, or I want the direction between me and the enemy I'm hitting, because I'm doing an AoE attack and I want to push them away from the character, regardless of my attack being an overlap sphere, etc., etc. So I actually made an enum that represents all these options, and I can just choose which one I want to attack with. It's really simple, just an enum that says non, attack, weapon, pawn, world, relative, etc., etc. And then I can offset that with just quaternion from Euler angles. Am I making any sense?
Kind of, but how are you actually getting the angle? So you've got the collision, you got your on collision enter, and you've got the hit. Like, how do you turn that, or where do you get the angle from that? I think is what they're trying to figure out.
Isn't it like you're saying that you're getting the Euler angle of the forward or whatever of the transform for the sword itself relative to the position of where it's hitting, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, so if I just want to hit with the sword and I know it's a slice, I'm saying this attack specifically will always use the forward of the weapon. I have a transform that says this is my forward, and I'm just taking its quaternion in world space. This is my rotation. And if I want to add an angle offset to it, I just combine them because quaternion multiplication is a thing. There you go.
So you detect what type of collision it is, and then use the correct transform or the correct forward based on that from your enum list, essentially. So you don't have to do a calculation. You really just figure. Oh, the calculation is figuring out what type of hit it is or what type of impact, and then you know which one to use.
Yeah, and it's really more simple than it sounds. There's very little calculation going on, and maybe I could share it. Give me a moment. Talk about something fun.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that seems more complicated than it ends up actually being a lot of the time.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is learning to solve the problem, right? Once you've solved the problem, it's usually easy enough to implement. It's like the first time you learn about using dot product to solve rotational stuff. You're like, oh, there's a number. I can do thing that generates a number that makes a lot of this easier.
Yeah. Well, guys, I gotta start to wrap things up here and start saying goodbye to everybody. It's Halloween. We got to get ready for the big day and all that. But I wanted to quickly mention a couple things before we do go. Like Andrew is doing over there is doing another stream tonight, right? A Halloween evening stream.
6 o'clock Pacific time for those of you who are in areas where there are no kids and there's nobody trick or treating. So you've got nothing to do. Come join.
You might end up with people ringing your doorbell the whole time throughout the stream, but I'm guessing it's not that kind of neighborhood.
It's not that kind of neighborhood. It's not that kind of neighborhood.
Yeah, we've got quite a few here, I think, getting ready, so it should be fun. So 6 o'clock, everybody can join that, and then you're right. You just sent me a link. What is this? I want to share this out.
So this is the entire code regarding getting the angle of hitting, and it's really way simpler than it looks.
Yeah, let's pop this up real quick so people can see some code before we go. It's not complicated at all.
So what you're seeing here is there's the intent of getting the attack orientation, and then because I want to be able to get it, I need to get the source of what I actually asked as my main angle, and then I want to rotate it by a certain amount. So the main beef of the intent is in get source rotation against, and the reactor for the attack is that. And what space of attack do I want to get? If it's nothing or walled, well, just get me no multiplication, just the quaternion identity, which is normal forward. If it's whoever got attacked, for example, if I just want to make a soul drain attack where the thing comes out from the forward of their character, like their heart popping out, etc., that would be their object's rotation. Can't be simpler than that, right? If it's the attacker, same thing, but with the attacker's rotation. And then for the weapon, I just have a forward pointer on the weapon that I get the rotation from. And attacker to attacked is just quaternion look rotation, which, if you don't know this method, you provide a forward vector and an up vector, and it will get you the rotation that it represents in roll space. Super useful, super simple to do. You just say, my direction is them minus me, which is me to them, and then whatever up you want. So in my case, it's the owner's up. So if my character is sideways gravitated, it would still be relatively right compared to the character. And after you get that, which again, it's all very simple, get different stuff and just one method call. And then you just do a simple multiplication and you're done. There is some code here for flattening the y-axis of the direction in case you want attacks that don't. So even if I cut with a sword and I want an attack that's just flat compared to the character, because it's some big effect and I don't need it to also be rotated and go into the floor, I can just flatten the y with this.
Can we share this code? You mind if we drop this up into the chat so people can go through it?
Sure.
Drop that paste bin up there, everybody, put that up there so everybody can check it out and go through and try it out. It's definitely interesting. I like that setup there with the enum there, just being able to specify it. It looks very familiar and nice.
Yeah, and you can set this per attack if you want to. In my case, it's each attack gets its own call of request attack, and I pass different parameters in. So Soul Ring gets the attacker forward. This stab attack gets the weapon up because it's always going to point up the tip of the blade. Slash attacks gets the weapon forward, etc., etc. Super simple to customize, super easy to calculate.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. So I guess to wrap it up, Andrew, you're going live at 6. Jason, you got any new videos coming out this week?
Not this week, no. I do have one that's really close to being done, but as I've mentioned earlier, I'm currently in Bluetooth hell right now, and that should hopefully be ending next week. And then I'm back to being able to have a bit more free time that doesn't involve me screaming at headsets.
Nice. And then Yora, you got anything upcoming you want to announce or share?
No, I don't, but I might get more interesting things to show next week with this.
I expect it definitely will be. Hopefully everybody comes back and joins us again next Sunday. Make sure that you like and subscribe and hit the little alert thing so that you get notified. And I think that's about it. Oh, anything else I wanted to share? Go ahead.
I do have one more thing that I wanted to share regarding Unity 2021.2, which is they added the ability to cut, copy, and paste assets in the project window.
That is definitely a cool one. So actually being able to copy and paste them down below in the project view, because now you can just duplicate, right?
Yeah, until now you could only duplicate. Was more like it. You could drag around in folders, but you can't cut and paste.
Yeah, that actually seems like a bigger one than like it sounds small, but I have a feeling that it's going to change my workflow completely. Like,
Yeah, it's one of those things that you expect to have but didn't get access to until now.
Yeah. So I just shared Jason Story's YouTube channel down in chat as well, and I believe it's in the description. If not, it'll be there in just a moment. So make sure that you go check that out, subscribe, and get notified when he sends out his next video. So far, there've been 3 or is it 4 now, and they've all been.
There's 3 at the moment. I'm currently working on one where I'm explaining Obsidian, that tool that I'm currently using. I'm also, you mentioned singletons. I've actually got a video in the works as well on singletons myself, where I'm kind of going into actually looking at what they are rather than whether they're good or bad. That kind of the moral question. So there's a couple of other bits as well, and I have a third video that I've written the script for, but I haven't done yet, which is about nulls and how you handle them in relative to how you automate the process, finding, populating, and fixing nulls in your code. There's a bunch of in the works stuff, but yeah, I've been unfortunately very busy as of late, so hopefully that'll wind down soon.
Nice. Yeah, that happens too. We all get busy, but I wanted to say, like, for anybody who is busy, if you haven't seen Jason's videos, they're all like very tight and concise and pretty straight to the point. So if you're busy and don't have a lot of time and just want some dense learning, that's definitely the place to go for it. It's just straight to the point and very on it. And I'm really curious for the Obsidian one because I actually tried to start switching to using Obsidian a little bit, but I just kind of struggling getting into it and getting used to it. So I think that video will hopefully push me over the edge. There's just lots of things where I want to keep notes where it seems like the right way to do it, but I feel like I need a little bit more of an intro. So I'm excited to see that.
Well, I know I have at least one convert in this group here. I just need to get the other rest of you on side.
Yeah. Well, I'm halfway there. I've started my Obsidian setup and I've been playing with it a bit, but I haven't dove in completely.
I literally have Obsidian open right here, and I'm looking at all my notes for this show. Jason had a lot of amazing tips for me. I actually have a document of these, so I can pass it over later if you want it.
Nice. Well,
the only problem I have with trying to explain it is just that it's got so many features that the question is, like, this is a small tangent. I won't take up too much time. I can show people how to use Obsidian because it's a tool, and I can go down the rabbit hole of here's cool plugins, here's the stuff. But the thing that's most valuable is what it allows you to do, which is this whole concept of personal knowledge management. And so before I go down the rabbit hole of here's all the plugins you should need, the number one bit of life advice for acquiring tools is tools, you'll only use them if it's easy to use. And therefore, if you don't fit a tool into your workflow, it'll be a toy and you won't use it. And so one of the most important things to do with any of these is to find out how it works for you first. And so before I even go down the rabbit hole of explaining all the different plugins and fun toys, I have to explain what is a problem you have, how you would use it, and why this is a good solution to that problem. It's kind of the same principle I do with general design patterns. But with this, it's like I changed my perspective of how I store information and what the point of me capturing it in the first place is. And until I cover that stuff, it's very hard to say, and here's some fun plugins. Like, that stuff facilitates you, but you need to be on board with why it's a valuable thing before I start going down and here's the 50 million ways to customize it route.
Well, I mean, the best way to sell an umbrella is just to wait for a rainy day. Which is to say, people will already know the value when they see the thing. So you could just skip that part and hope the people who seek the knowledge just find it.
I guess, yeah. I found that I've dropped a lot of tools in my life because they're like, oh, that's a fun toy. But when I actually stopped and really thought about it, Obsidian, like, I dropped 10 applications that Obsidian has now replaced for all of my stuff because I took the time to see what it does relative to what I need. And I want to make sure that I can convince people that it's not just something to play with, that it's genuinely like, it's kind of amazing how much stuff this can do.
To the people asking if I have a YouTube channel, I do. It doesn't have anything recent, and it's not worth following right now. Maybe in the future, but we'll get to that then.
Okay, you or I making YouTube videos soon, right?
Oh, and as a small aside note, we talked about succinct videos. Well, I will say, I agree. Most of the videos I've put out, the 3 videos I put out, are relatively succinct. I would like to live stream someday. I would like to actually do code reviews and stuff live. But as we've established, the few times I've tried to share my screen, it's like this vague grey potato of horribleness that you can't read. And that's down to my terrible internet quality. So I'm currently in the process of 5xing my internet speed. I'm working to get that sorted. And if that ever does get sorted, I'll actually have the bandwidth to share my screen live and not have to wait till I've done a heavily edited video. So there might be in future, when that's finally resolved with my internet provider, some videos where I actually do have streams or long form stuff.
Oh, nice. That would be cool, dude. You got to get that fixed up. Get some Tesla internet or something. And
you could always pair program in Restream.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I wouldn't mind.
Speaking of live streams, I think I'm going to do another one tomorrow, and I might actually just I got some game dev stuff I want to do, but I also kind of want to play some Age of Empires with some other people on the stream. So if anybody that's watching or watches this later happens to want to play a game, play live on the stream, maybe we'll do like a 4-on-4 with everybody on there. Just shoot me an email and we'll talk and see if we can figure this out. See if there's enough people interested, or if I'm the only one that's obsessed with this stupid game. Anyway, I think I need to start cutting everything here. So we'll just say thanks to everybody for coming out. Oh, and the Lego game. So a real quick question. I'm going to do I have a video on it. It's coming out in the next day or two. As soon as it's finished up editing, we'll talk all about how that game jam went and the results of it and stuff. So the game's up there. You can play it. I'll send out an email. Make sure you're on my email list and all that. Talk about it. But anyway, thanks again for coming out and joining us. Please hit the like button, the subscribe, or even the join button. Maybe you'll be the first. And then we'll be back next week, and Andrew will be live in just a little bit. And we'll all be live again, I guess, this week sometime soon too. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks, guys, for coming out. Any last final words, parting words?
Happy Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
Happy Halloween. Go trick-or-treating.
Wait. One last thing. For anybody who is going trick-or-treating, here's my life pro tip. If you're going out trick-or-treating, you're probably going to get one of 3 things. Good stuff that's not for you that your friends might like, and crap, like peanuts and things. Bring a bag and put 2 bags inside the bag, hold all the handles. You can switch hands to drop into one of 3 sub-bags. You can drop all the crap into one bag, all the stuff that you like into one, and all the stuff your friends might like into the other. So by the time you get home, you can separate the 3 bags out, hand the bag of stuff you don't like to your friend, throw out the crap bag, and keep the good stuff. Really quick tip if you don't have to sort through a big pile of stuff. Optimize your candy collection. There you go. That's my example.
And if you're still trick-or-treating.
Yeah,
Sure.
This is for all of the 8-year-old game devs out there.
Yeah.
Plotting it out. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, and I guess we'll see you again soon. Bye.